The sound of history breaking is never loud at first. It begins with a whisper, a quill scratching against paper, a mathematician alone under the steel domes of Trantor. Outside his window, billions of lights stretch into infinity, each one a sign of civilization's triumph and its blindness. He writes an equation that will one day predict not just the collapse of empires, but the death of every democracy that ever dares to exist. He doesn't call it prophecy. He calls it psychohistory, the mathematics of destiny. Imagine a formula so vast it can measure the future of 1,000,000 worlds. One that turns chaos into prediction, rebellion into calculus, freedom into a variable. Hari Seldon believed numbers could save humanity from its own patterns. But what happens when the same numbers reveal that even freedom itself follows a curve? That every democracy carries the seed of its own destruction, hidden like a flaw in crystal from the moment it's formed? That is the forbidden equation. And in our world, on our small planet, it may already be running. The question isn't if the empire will fall, it's why we never see it coming until it's too late. Pause for a moment, look around your own world. Democracies now measure public will through polls, algorithms, predictive analytics. Corporations know your desires before you articulate them. Governments simulate social unrest with machine learning. We are, in essence, building our own version of psychohistory without ever admitting it. But Seldon's version came from desperation, not ambition. At the height of the Galactic Empire, Trantor was perfection turned to steel. Entire continents were buried under metal. Oceans were drained to feed the capital's hunger. 1 billion bureaucrats maintained the illusion of order, while the edges of the empire burned. Civilizations that once sent tribute now sent silence. But in the core, the Senate still debated budgets. The emperor still smiled from his throne of platinum. And beneath it all, in a small university chamber, Hari Seldon ran simulations. His models showed the empire's future collapsing, not from invasion or plague, but from entropy of the mind. Bureaucracy had replaced curiosity. Ceremony had replaced truth. Knowledge had become the property of those who no longer understood it. He tested his equations again and again. The numbers always agreed. Within 5 centuries, the empire would disintegrate into 30,000 years of darkness. He didn't want to believe it, but the math didn't care what he wanted. And so began the plan to reduce that darkness to just 1 millennium, the Seldon Plan. Yet at its heart lay a paradox. To save civilization, he had to surrender control of it. To predict the future, he had to hide from it. Every decision would have to appear spontaneous, every crisis preordained. The Foundation was born not as a colony, but as an algorithm disguised as faith. Imagine being the man who writes humanity's fate into numbers, then realizes that numbers don't love you back. Seldon's theory wasn't evil. It was elegant, maybe even merciful. But like all equations, it assumed its variables would behave. It assumed humans would follow their averages, not their hearts. It never accounted for anomalies, for the unpredictable spark of emotion, for the mule. That flaw, emotion, chaos, the irrational, was what no mathematician could trap. And that, Seldon knew, would one day tear through his perfect plan like a meteor through glass. Still, he continued, because what choice did he have? Every civilization, he wrote, is a wave on the surface of time. Each believes it's eternal. Each forgets that beneath its light lies gravity, the pull toward decay. History isn't a straight line, it's a heartbeat. Rise, fall, rise again. But what if you could smooth that heartbeat? What if you could flatten the chaos, the pain, the centuries of barbarism between peaks? That's what psychohistory promised, a gentle descent instead of free fall. And yet, the deeper truth was more terrifying. If every system, even freedom, can be modeled, then free will itself may be nothing but a statistical illusion. On Trantor, the idea was heresy. To claim you could predict the will of the empire was to question the divine right of its rulers. To suggest that even the throne obeyed mathematics was to hint that emperors were replaceable. So when Seldon presented his findings before the Imperial Commission, he wasn't just a scientist, he was an existential threat. The hall where he stood was a cathedral of light, the ceiling a holographic map of the galaxy. Senators, military heads, clerics, all leaned forward. "Professor Seldon," one of them said, "are you telling us that the Empire will fall?" "I'm telling you," he answered, "that it already has." A silence heavier than gravity filled the chamber. They laughed, of course, not openly, too dangerous, but with that careful derision of powerful men who don't believe in consequences. And yet, even their laughter had tremor in it, because deep down, they sensed the truth. Empires don't die in battles. They die when truth becomes impolite. And that's where the story of this forbidden equation truly begins, not with the birth of psychohistory, but with its denial. Hari Seldon wasn't the first man to predict the death of democracy. Every age has its prophets, its Cassandras, its ignored visionaries. But he was the first to do it scientifically. That was his crime. The mathematics of destiny, once written, could not be unwritten. His notebooks became sacred, his equations forbidden. They were locked in vaults, sealed under imperial law. But like all forbidden knowledge, they leaked. Copies appeared in archives, in black markets, in half-remembered legends told by traders who whispered about a man who measured fate. Even centuries later, long after Trantor burned, fragments of his formula would reappear under new names. Statistical sociology, behavioral forecasting, predictive governance. Every age rediscovers psychohistory in its own reflection. And every age fears it. Because if history is predictable, then morality becomes a question of mathematics. If collapse is inevitable, is rebellion still noble, or just noise in the algorithm? If freedom itself is a variable, can democracy truly exist? The forbidden equation doesn't answer these questions, it only shows the curve, and that curve always bends downward. On Trantor, it ended with a whisper. 1,000 floors beneath the surface, in an archive that stretched like a labyrinth under the planet's crust. There, among the endless shelves, a quiet clerk once found a scrap of paper, a simple equation marked in Seldon's hand. He read it once, twice, and understood nothing, except that it described the death of everything he loved. He didn't tell anyone, he just burned it. But fire, like truth, never stays buried for long. Centuries later, on worlds far from Trantor, other minds would rediscover it, and once again the numbers would begin to predict the fall. Not of empires this time, but of democracies built on data and fear. The forbidden equation doesn't belong to Hari Seldon anymore. It belongs to every civilization that believes it's too advanced to fail. Which brings us to now. You may think this story is fiction, a distant mirror of another galaxy. But every great fall begins with the same arrogance, that knowledge will save us, that progress is permanent, that numbers can't lie. They can. They just tell a truth we refuse to hear. And somewhere, right now, our own equations are being written, not by prophets, by algorithms. The same hunger to predict, to control, to foresee, the same impulse that drove Seldon, is alive in every data center, every predictive model, every election simulation. We're all living inside a smaller, faster, more fragile version of his plan. And if psychohistory was designed to shorten the Dark Age, what are our algorithms designed to do? That's the paradox. We've inherited the power to predict collapse, but not the wisdom to prevent it. The story of the forbidden equation isn't just about Trantor, it's about us. And it begins here, with a man who believed that mathematics could save humanity from itself, and may have doomed it instead. Long before the quills scratched the first equations on Trantor, the galaxy had already begun its slow descent. Millions of worlds, billions of souls, bound together by the first Galactic Empire stretching across light years like veins in a living organism. It was magnificent and doomed. Civilization, once a flame dancing across stars, had become a great, steady inferno, burning brightly yet blind to the wind that would extinguish it. Imagine Trantor from orbit. A single city covering the entire planet, layered like the strata of a living cathedral. The metal towers glinting in artificial sunlight, the endless streets and canals reflecting a civilization too proud to remember the past. The planet was alive with motion. Couriers racing through pneumatic tubes, lev cars floating silently above chrome boulevards, workers toiling in subterranean factories for centuries-old programs. The air hummed with electricity, voices, and the subtle rhythm of the bureaucratic heart. Every corner of the city was meticulously catalogued, recorded, and assigned a numerical value. And yet, as any historian of Trantor could tell you, this perfection was already a trap. Empires do not collapse overnight, they bleed slowly, in invisible ways. A law ignored here, a ritual corrupted there, and the network of order frays. Trantor's fall was not marked by explosions or armies crossing the sky. It was encoded in spreadsheets, in memos, in the subtle erosion of vigilance. Citizens no longer remembered why they built monuments. The emperor's decrees were recited by rote, stripped of context, carried out by officials who believed that obedience was wisdom. Hari Seldon understood this decay in ways no one else could. He studied the patterns of civilizations from Earth's forgotten histories: Rome, Byzantium, the Ming dynasty, even the fleeting power of digital age democracies on faraway worlds. Every empire followed the same rhythm: ambitious rise, pinnacle of achievement, creeping stagnation, corruption, and inevitable collapse. Trantor's brilliance blinded it to the simplest of truths: patterns repeat and entropy is relentless. The galaxy itself was a stage for Seldon's thought experiments. He modeled each sector as a subsystem, each population as a variable, and every culture as a fluctuating constant. Through this, he could see the shape of the future, not as prophecy but as mathematics. The collapse was not only inevitable, it was quantifiable. 30,000 years of chaos stretched before humanity like a shadow over the stars. Yet in Seldon's calculations, a solution appeared. Not salvation in the sense of victory, but mitigation. A way to shorten the Dark Age from 30 millennia to a mere 1,000. A plan that required discipline, secrecy, and the courage to place human freedom inside an equation. The foundation would become both seed and shield, a repository of knowledge, a living experiment in civilization building, and it would be built at the periphery, far from the corruption of the core. In that sense, the birth of the equation was less a scientific act than an act of rebellion, against time, against the arrogance of emperors, against the assumption that societies could save themselves through willpower alone. Seldon's mathematics were cold, ruthless, precise, but merciful. They promised that civilization need not die in agony. If humanity could follow the curve, the Dark Age could be measured, contained, and survived. It was also terrifying. To wield this knowledge meant accepting a universe where free will, heroism, and spontaneous brilliance were only minor deviations around a predictable mean. History became a function, humans the variables, and the stars themselves the coefficients. The implications were staggering. What would it mean to live in a world where destiny was not written in the heavens, but in numbers? The Empire's reaction was slow, as empires often are. Trantor's Senate debated minor legislation while the real decay occurred in unmonitored archives, in the unnoticed bureaucracies that maintained the illusion of order. Yet Seldon's work began to infiltrate certain sectors. Scholars whispered of statistical modeling. Merchants experimented with predictive trade networks. Even governors at the edges of the galaxy noticed subtle manipulations in resource allocation. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the concept of psychohistory seeped into the culture, though always veiled, always hidden from those in power who might destroy it before it could take root. And then the anomalies appeared, the first wrinkles in his grand plan. individuals whose behavior defied statistical expectation, civilizations that deviated from the predicted path, natural disasters that disrupted equilibrium. Even at this early stage, Seldon recognized that mathematics could only do so much. The unpredictability of emotion, the weight of leadership, the spark of genius, or the flare of tyranny, all of these could bend the curve. Yet he had faith that on the scale of millions of people, patterns would hold. Seldon's genius lay in his understanding of scale. One man's choices might be chaotic, but the choices of billions averaged into discernible flows. Economies, wars, social movements, all could be modeled. And so the first iteration of the forbidden equation was born, a function that could simulate mass human behavior, predict collapse, and, in theory, chart the route to recovery. It was elegant, terrifying, and, if preserved, immortal. But even as the equation spread through hidden channels, the core of the empire remained indifferent. Emperors continued their pageantry. Generals planned campaigns on the periphery. Courtiers measured their influence in ceremonies and titles. The machinery of government operated as it always had, slow, bureaucratic, and blind. Yet in this blindness lay the seeds of collapse. Seldon foresaw the crises that would punctuate history: economic collapses, resource wars, political fragmentation, the rise of charismatic leaders capable of bending the masses. He termed them Seldon crises, points where only one solution preserved the plan. At these junctures, the Foundation's role was crucial. They would act, seemingly spontaneously, but always along the path he had modeled. And here lies the chilling beauty of Seldon's work. The equation did not enslave people. It did not mandate obedience. It predicted the consequences of freedom itself. It revealed that even choices made in passion, fear, or hope fall into patterns when viewed across millions of lives. In this sense, psychohistory was not just science. It was philosophy, ethics, and mathematics fused into a single instrument capable of saving or dooming humanity. Yet for all its promise, the first whispers of fear had already begun. Scholars debated the morality of such knowledge. Could one truly predict the fall of democracy without becoming tyrant over it? Could a plan designed to shorten centuries of chaos survive the unpredictability of genius or madness? And what of anomalies? Rogue individuals whose actions could collapse centuries of careful calculation in moments. These were questions Seldon accepted with calm resolve. He knew that the equation was a tool, not a dictator. The Foundation would not be perfect, nor could it prevent every disaster. But it could channel human endeavor toward survival. And survival, in the end, is the only metric that matters. For now, the galaxy continued its indifferent rotation. Planets spun silently in their orbits. Civilizations grew and decayed without noticing the subtle mathematical currents guiding them. Trantor burned bright in the core, a beacon of order amid the slow chaos, unaware that a single equation, written on a scholar's desk, would one day decide the fate of its democracy, and every democracy to follow. And yet, in that equation lay the spark of hope. That even collapse is not absolute, that even despair can be measured, mitigated, and perhaps overcome. The galaxy, in all its immensity, had never known a tool like this, and humanity, in all its arrogance, had never been so unprepared to wield it. Suspense hangs in the void. The stage is set. The equation exists. But who will find it first? Who will act upon it? And can any empire survive the truth of its own mathematics? The air on Trantor is metallic, not the metallic of coin or sword, but the metallic of machinery breathing, endlessly, over eons. Pipes hum beneath your feet. Elevators swoop through floors like glass arrows. Somewhere above, the city's energy core pulses with a quiet, steady heartbeat, felt more than heard. Steam rises from vents, carrying scents of hot metal, ozone, and the faint perfume of synthetic vegetation grown in glass terraces to remind citizens of a world long forgotten. Walk the streets, and you hear the pulse of the empire, though its rulers imagine it silent. Footfalls echo in corridors where no one looks up. Couriers with lev carts deliver messages whose contents will never matter. Senators debate laws in chambers built for visibility rather than effectiveness. Every sound, every movement, every note of bureaucratic ritual is part of the pattern Seldon watches. It is here, in this living labyrinth, that the philosophy of collapse is written in sensation. Trantor does not fail because of rebellion or war. It fails because it forgets itself. Its citizens are surrounded by grandeur and knowledge, yet they walk blind through both. Power becomes ceremonial. Curiosity becomes a crime. The city, for all its brilliance, has no memory, only momentum. Seldon's work, when read in this sensory context, takes on a nearly sacred weight. He did not theorize from a distance. He wandered the streets, listened to the hum of administration, smelled the heated iron of industry, and saw the fatigue behind every clerk's eyes. It was there he saw the first cracks in the core, where pride and lethargy conspired to undermine civilization. One could almost map the collapse in smell, in echo, in the subtle dimming of lights in the sublevels where the poorest citizens lived. And yet, even amid this decay, the modern mind sees echoes of Trantor everywhere. Cities today hum with similar rhythms. Our skyscrapers pulse with data. Our governments thrum with networks of statistics, and our digital architectures are just as blind to decay as Trantor's metal streets. Social media algorithms, predictive policing, automated finance, these are our pipelines of information, precise and ruthless, yet incapable of sensing the erosion of trust, the corrosion of freedom, the slow entropy of morality. Philosophy, when applied here, is unavoidable. If the heartbeat of a civilization can be predicted, what does it mean for free will? Are our choices our own, or just statistical variations in an equation too vast to perceive? Seldon's answer is as elegant as it is disturbing. Free will exists in microcosm, destiny exists in macrocosm. The individual can choose, the collective is measured. The anomaly may rise, but the mass obeys patterns as inexorably as planets orbit stars. Imagine walking past a market in Trantor's lower levels. Children run between stalls. Vendors shout prices. Coins change hands. One boy throws a ball that shatters a ceramic pot. An officer reprimands the vendor. In isolation, it is chaos. But on the scale of 1,000,000 markets across millions of worlds, the behavior of buyers, sellers, and children forms a predictable wave. This is the fundamental principle of psychohistory. The small is meaningless, the large is measurable. Yet Trantor also teaches a warning. Pattern recognition is seductive. To see the flow of human behavior as numbers is to ignore emotion, desire, fear, and love, the anomalies that break the curve. The city hums with billions of people, but within that hum are the unpredictable sparks. A clerk who disobeys an order, a senator who bribes or betrays, a citizen who dreams of something beyond the city's steel walls. These sparks are minor, often unnoticed, but they are Seldon's greatest threat. One anomaly, magnified by circumstance, can disrupt centuries of calculation. Here lies a parallel to our world today. Algorithms measure our behavior, predict trends, and nudge society subtly towards stability or instability. Yet the anomalies persist: the whistleblower, the viral idea, the spontaneous rebellion. No equation can fully account for passion. No model can capture the irrational brilliance or folly of the individual. And yet, like Seldon's foundation, we attempt to harness these models to preserve our civilization, to shorten potential dark ages of misinformation, unrest, and digital decay. The irony is unavoidable. Trantor, in all its sophistication, was blind to its own patterns. We, in all our technology, risk the same. What Seldon understood intuitively, that civilization can be saved through prediction but not entirely controlled, remains the central lesson. Our equations may forecast trends, but they cannot replace judgment. They cannot contain empathy. They cannot measure courage. And still, we try. Just as Seldon did, we build models, equations, and plans. And just as Seldon did, we hope that the scale of human numbers will preserve order, even when the actions of individuals threaten it. We hope that the pattern holds. The sensory experience of Trantor makes this palpable. Imagine the endless corridors of government archives, where every decision, every decree, every calculation is recorded and cross-referenced. Imagine the archives extending not just miles, but kilometers deep underground, where the smell of old paper mingles with ionized air. Imagine clerks who have never seen the sky, who spend their lives in the hum of machinery, their eyes flicking from data terminal to terminal, oblivious to the collapse happening above and around them. This is the theater of entropy, a civilization that records itself meticulously but cannot recognize its own decay. And yet, amid this overwhelming structure, moments of humanity persist. A scholar whispers to a student about forbidden knowledge. A merchant hides a message about corruption in a ledger. A janitor pauses to listen to the distant wind channeled through ventilation shafts, a reminder that outside the steel, stars still shine. These anomalies, though small, hint at the spark that may one day save or doom the empire. The philosophical question emerges naturally. Is the preservation of civilization worth the suppression of spontaneity? If we plan every crisis, predict every collapse, and channel society along a predetermined path, are we safeguarding humanity or controlling it? Seldon's equation doesn't answer that. It only reveals the contours of possibility, and perhaps that is all any civilization can hope for. A map of potentialities, a guide through inevitable darkness, a chance to shorten the span of chaos without eliminating the beauty and danger of choice. Pause and consider the stakes. For Trantor, every hum of machinery, every flicker of neon light, every muffled conversation beneath domed ceilings is part of a pattern no one perceives. For our world, every server, every social media post, every algorithmic prediction is doing the same. Are we citizens of Trantor without knowing it? Are our futures already calculated in ways we cannot see? The city stretches endlessly, but Seldon's vision is even larger. He imagined the entire galaxy as a single system, every world a variable, every civilization a function within the grand equation. And he saw the curves bending downward, entropy, decay, collapse. Yet within those curves, there is room for ingenuity, for adaptation, for survival. This is the quiet, terrifying optimism of psychohistory. The collapse is inevitable, but the depth of darkness is not. Civilization can endure, if guided wisely. As the reader, viewer, listener, witness, there is an unavoidable tension. To understand the patterns is to accept both hope and fear simultaneously. To grasp the equation is to see the fragility of freedom. The very tools designed to save us may reveal that our cherished liberties are variables in a larger function we cannot control. And then, just when the hum of the city seems eternal, the cracks appear. In the sublevels, a clerk discovers a data anomaly. A trader notices a ripple in economic activity that defies models. A scholar finds a fragment of forbidden knowledge, a note hidden in centuries-old records. The pattern is breaking, not catastrophically yet, but it is enough. Enough to remind us that in every civilization, in every democracy, anomalies exist, and they are the only unpredictable force left. For Seldon, this was always the ultimate lesson. Mathematics can chart the likely course of empires. History can be predicted. Collapse can be mitigated. But the human element, the spark of will, rebellion, love, or genius, cannot be constrained entirely. It is within this tension that civilization finds both its danger and its salvation. Trantor, in all its grandeur, is a lesson to us all. The equation may exist, the pattern may hold. Yet within the data, Within the human heart lies the chaos that no model can tame. And the question remains, if every empire is a pattern, if every democracy a variable, how long before our own world discovers that it too is part of an equation it cannot escape? In the underbelly of Trantor, where the neon hum fades into shadows, lives are small but not insignificant. Clerks shuffle between towering cabinets of data, their hands brushing the spines of dusty records that contain the lifeblood of the empire. Each ledger, each scroll, each calculation is a thread in the vast tapestry Seldon has spent decades mapping. Most clerks never consider the patterns they feed into, but a few notice the anomalies, the irregularities that hint at the cracks in the core. Take Urin, a junior archivist on level 238, a floor so far beneath the sun it might as well be another world. His job is simple: cross-reference trade records from the outer sectors. Yet one night he notices a discrepancy. A shipment that should have arrived decades ago has no record. Ships are assigned to sectors that do not exist. Numbers shift between terminals as if alive. At first, he thinks it is an error. But errors do not behave this way. Patterns cannot lie. And yet, the data screams of chaos. Uran feels a chill, one that has nothing to do with the sub-level air. He realizes the empire itself might be a lie, or at least a fragile illusion. In that moment, the mathematics Seldon left behind seems less like a tool and more like a warning. The numbers are screaming at him, telling him to see the truth. The core is rotting, the patterns bending, and the collapse is closer than anyone imagines. Above him, the streets of Trantor pulse with life. Lev cars glide silently. Markets overflow with synthetic food. Citizens chatter about law, ceremony, and trivialities. But these lives are irrelevant to the inevitable arc. Seldon's equations have charted. A merchant counts coins, unaware that his wealth will one day be meaningless. A senator rehearses his speech, oblivious to the decay in the very institutions he serves. The hum of the city is relentless, a constant reminder that life continues even as the foundations crumble. Meanwhile, far above in the imperial towers, a young senator named Prem Palver contemplates a crisis no one else sees. Reports of unrest on the rim worlds have arrived. Systems that should be loyal are murmuring rebellion. Governors request troops, traders demand protection, and the emperor still insists that everything is fine. Prem senses the same patterns Seldon has calculated. The core is too confident, too rigid, and far too late to respond effectively. Yet no one listens. They are all too busy preserving appearances. Even in the quieter corners of Trantor, life moves with a strange, eerie rhythm. A janitor, cleaning the upper levels, notices a note dropped in a recycling chute. It is a fragment of Seldon's earliest writings, an equation, partially obscured, warning that democracy is not eternal. The janitor does not understand it. He pockets it, unsure why. Yet he feels a weight settle in his chest, a sense of foreboding he cannot name. The universe has whispered its secret, and he has heard it, if only barely. And then there is Rita, a young student of statistics, who overhears her professor discussing psychohistory. Her curiosity is immediate, fierce. She imagines a galaxy where collapse is not inevitable, where knowledge can act as a shield against entropy. Yet the more she studies, the more she realizes the terrifying implications. If the future can be predicted, what happens to the choices she believed were hers? If human behavior is a variable in a cosmic equation, where does free will reside? Her nights are haunted by the equation's logic, the sense that her own life is already a fraction of a pattern written before she was born. Across the city, in a smoky cafe where traders and minor officials convene, whispers of the same forbidden knowledge circulate. An old merchant tells a story of a mathematician who predicted the fall of Trantor centuries before the first cracks appeared. His listeners laugh politely, but one trader, a woman named Bela, leans forward. She senses in the story a warning for herself, for her business, for the world she thinks she controls. And in that moment, the mathematics of destiny becomes personal, a haunting presence in the lives of ordinary people who will soon discover that their choices may not matter as much as they believe. Seldon's genius was not in foreseeing every rebellion or every disaster. It was in seeing the forest for the trees, the vast interconnected patterns invisible to the powerful and mundane alike. Yet anomalies always exist, and humanity cannot help but create them. One clerk notices a discrepancy. One student asks the wrong question. One merchant decides to take a risk. Each of these sparks could, individually, appear meaningless. But in the aggregate, they carry the potential to defy the plan, or accelerate its fulfillment. The true tension of the story is revealed here. Seldon's plan requires humans to act in ways he has predicted, but humans are not numbers. They are complex, emotional, unpredictable, and sometimes the smallest act, a misfiled report, a whispered rumor, a fleeting doubt, can ripple through the galaxy in ways that even psychohistory cannot fully contain. As the layers of Trantor's population intersect, the viewer begins to see the stakes. Uran, the clerk, will soon uncover a pattern that challenges everything he thought he knew. Rita, the student, will realize the personal cost of knowing the plan. Bela, the merchant, will face a choice that could either preserve or destroy the fragile equilibrium Seldon engineered. And Prem Palver, the senator, will discover that the core's arrogance leaves it vulnerable to forces it cannot calculate. The Empire hums, unaware of the storm beneath the surface. The forbidden equation exists, hidden, fragmentary, incomplete, but already powerful enough to shape destinies. Each character is caught in the web, struggling against currents they do not yet understand. And just as the narrative reaches this point, the tension escalates. In a sub-level archive, Uran finally deciphers the fragment he found months ago. It is Seldon's equation, complete enough to reveal a terrifying truth. The patterns are bending not gradually, but precipitously. Democracy, liberty, the core itself, all are on the cusp of collapse. And then, a shadow falls across the terminal. Another figure stands behind him watching. Uran does not recognize the face. The person whispers one word: "Stop." The screen flickers. Data begins to corrupt. Files vanish before his eyes. The hum of the archive shifts from steady to chaotic, and somewhere, above, the engines of Trantor shudder ever so slightly. The forbidden equation is no longer a secret. Someone else knows, and they intend to act. The fate of the Empire, the lives of millions, and the survival of democracy itself hang by a thread. The first Galactic Empire was vast beyond comprehension, stretching across millions of inhabited worlds. Trantor, its beating heart, reflected the civilization's brilliance and its fatal flaws. From orbit, the planet looked eternal, its gleaming towers and endless streets a monument to order. But like Rome in its final centuries, Byzantium when its coffers emptied, or even empires of our own world, brilliance was no shield against decay. Empires die not with a single blow, but through the slow corrosion of systems and souls. For centuries, the empire survived through a combination of bureaucratic rigor, military dominance, and the careful manipulation of commerce. Senators debated endlessly, officials recorded every transaction, and governors maintained loyalty through incentives and fear. It was a complex machine, precise and enormous, and like any machine, it could be measured, predicted, and ultimately broken. The outer worlds, once thriving with tribute and culture, began to wither under neglect. Trade routes faltered, taxes went unpaid, and communication lagged across light years. Rebellions were quashed, but they left scars. In the periphery, entire planets became shadows of what they had been. Civilization did not vanish overnight. It decayed incrementally, imperceptibly, until its inhabitants no longer recognized what they had lost. At the core, the illusion of order persisted. Trantor's towers glimmered, Its bureaucrats shuffled papers with unwavering diligence, and the emperor presided over ceremonies that hid systemic rot. The Senate debated fiscal minutiae, while starvation quietly gnawed at the edges of the galaxy. Citizens of the core assumed stability was eternal. History, they believed, was merely a record of their own brilliance. Yet Seldon's mathematics could see what they could not. Human societies, he calculated, follow patterns akin to living organisms. They grow, peak, decline, and eventually die, unless corrective action is taken. Empires rise and fall not solely because of conquest, plague, or rebellion, but because the mechanisms that maintain them become rigid. Bureaucracy ossifies, innovation is stifled, and tradition replaces judgment.
History echoes these patterns repeatedly. Rome, at its height, stretched from the British Isles to the sands of Arabia, yet suffered collapse because it could no longer integrate its diverse populations. Byzantium endured longer, but decayed under endless court intrigue. Even the British Empire, with its industrial power, faltered under economic overstretch and colonial resistance. Trantor, in its splendor, followed the same trajectory. Enormous scale created vulnerability. What could sustain billions of humans also made the system brittle, unable to respond swiftly to anomalies. The human cost was invisible at first. Entire generations grew up in the empire unaware of the decay around them. Children learned ceremonial law but not practical governance. Merchants and scholars followed routines dictated by tradition rather than necessity. Knowledge was preserved, yes, but not understood. Libraries overflowed with records that no one read. Machines ran, not because they were necessary, but because they had always run. And yet, it was precisely this blindness that Seldon exploited. His plan depended not on immediate intervention, but on anticipating the slow-motion collapse that would inevitably occur. He could see the Seldon crises looming on the horizon, moments where only precise action could guide humanity along a safer path. But to most of the empire, nothing seemed wrong. Every ritual, every decree, every report contributed to the illusion of stability. Still, anomalies began to emerge. Governors who resisted policy, traders who defied monopolies, planets that ignored taxation. Each deviation was minor but measurable. The empire's rigidity could not absorb these shocks indefinitely. Small fractures widened, revealing that the system could not correct itself. Stability was no longer a guarantee, it was a veneer. Meanwhile, the core continued its cycle of oblivion. Senators grew fat with ceremony. The emperor's advisors debated etiquette and protocol while the machinery of governance ran on autopilot. Even the most loyal officials had begun to act out of self-interest, unconsciously contributing to decay. And as the empire aged, power became concentrated in fewer hands, creating hierarchies that prioritized survival over adaptability. The outer sectors felt the pressure first. Worlds that once sent tribute now withheld taxes. Systems previously loyal to the emperor began forming alliances with one another, seeking protection outside imperial oversight. Rebellions were frequent but ineffective, as the core's authority was still formidable. Yet the cracks multiplied, feeding one another, creating a network of instability that the empire's rulers barely noticed. Seldon's genius was in recognizing the inevitability of this pattern. The decline was not random. It was mathematically predictable, and while individuals might act heroically or destructively, the aggregate behavior of billions of people followed a curve. The empire's collapse was as inevitable as a star burning out, brilliant for centuries, then fading. At the same time, Seldon observed hope. Within the decay, new leaders would rise. Traders, scholars, and visionaries could guide humanity if the plan was followed. Knowledge could be preserved. Civilization could be protected, but only if action was taken before collapse reached critical mass. And so, the stage was set. The first Galactic Empire, vast, complex, and seemingly invincible, teetered on the edge of systemic failure.
Its bureaucracies were efficient yet blind. Its citizens were numerous yet complacent. Its leaders were powerful yet incapable of seeing the tide of entropy washing over their worlds. Seldon's forbidden equation, though hidden, already cast a shadow over everything. Every anomaly, every inefficiency, every act of ambition or rebellion rippled across the galaxy. The plan was poised to intervene, but only at the right moments. The Seldon crises were coming, and the first tremors were already felt in quiet archives, in the whispers of traders, in the unrecorded footsteps of those who noticed the cracks. And as with all great empires, the question remained, would the first Galactic Empire survive through wisdom, or would its blind pride accelerate the inevitable? The echoes of history are clear. Every civilization follows a pattern. Trantor, for all its splendor, is no exception. And in its vast halls, where the hum of bureaucracy never ceases, one can almost hear the whisper of collapse, a warning unheeded, a shadow already lengthening over the core. The first Seldon crises are not centuries away, they are approaching. And when they arrive, the fate of the Empire and the fate of the galaxy will hinge on decisions made by a few individuals in moments that seem, at the time, insignificant. Walk through the corridors of Trantor, and you feel the hum of history beneath your feet. Not just the hum of machinery, though the pipes, generators, and energy conduits vibrate like veins carrying blood through the planet's metal body. It is the hum of human effort, the endless motions of bureaucrats, clerks, merchants, soldiers, and citizens performing rituals repeated for centuries. Each motion, each transaction, each ceremony is a pulse in the rhythm of a civilization already straining under its own weight. The smell of Trantor is a combination of metals, ozone, and synthetic agriculture, an olfactory map of human ingenuity and neglect. In the upper levels, artificial gardens release scents of flowers that never bloom in nature, a fragile attempt to remind the inhabitants of life beyond steel and stone. Below, in the sublevels, the aroma of heated machinery mingles with recycled air, a scent that speaks of industry, survival, and the quiet oppression of routine. Every inhalation is a lesson in the Empire's priorities: function over freedom, order over curiosity. And yet, amid these sensory impressions, the philosophical weight of decline becomes almost tangible. Civilization is a machine of human intention, and like any machine, it can only operate as designed. Over time, however, wear accumulates. Greed, ritual, tradition, and complacency corrode the mechanisms of governance and culture. Knowledge becomes performative, experience becomes ceremonial, and the hum of efficiency masks the slow erosion of creativity and courage. Seldon's psychohistory illuminates this decay in a way no historian could. He did not simply predict that the empire would fall, he understood why it would. He understood that mass human behavior produces patterns, and that these patterns, when rigid and unexamined, create self-fulfilling collapse. The core's blind faith in ceremony, the bureaucracy's insistence on protocol over understanding, the citizens' assumption that their civilization is eternal, all of these are predictable forces bending toward entropy. Now consider the market districts. Traders negotiate prices in a symphony of urgency and routine. Ships arrive and depart, their logs meticulously maintained. On the surface, life is thriving. Yet every micro-interaction, miscounted goods, misfiled contracts, small rebellions of labor, adds a ripple to the pattern Seldon studies. The city is alive in a statistical sense, but dead in the sense of self-awareness. It functions, but it does not understand itself. The philosophical question emerges naturally. If a civilization can function while blind to its own fragility, can it ever truly act in its own defense? And if human behavior can be predicted at scale, what is the value of individual choice? These are not merely academic concerns. For Trantor, they are existential. Its citizens assume freedom while obeying patterns. Its rulers assume control while being guided by forces they do not perceive. This mirrors our world today. Algorithms predict consumer behavior. Social networks influence elections. Financial systems operate on automated feedback loops. Cities pulse with data. Governments hum with surveillance, and corporations anticipate desires before individuals articulate them. Like Trantor, we live within a system that functions efficiently but lacks awareness of its fragility. Patterns exist, and anomalies, though unpredictable, threaten stability. Step into the quieter areas, a university lecture hall where a professor teaches history to a dozen students. The walls are lined with archives, data projections floating mid-air, yet the students' engagement is perfunctory. They absorb information, memorize dates, but rarely question cause or consequence. Seldon would note this as a symptom of systemic decay. Knowledge preserved without comprehension, rituals enacted without understanding. Civilization, in these moments, is like a machine running on autopilot, beautiful in function, hollow in purpose. The auditory landscape adds another layer. In the core, conversations are clipped, formalized, rehearsed. In the sublevels, murmurs of frustration, secretive whispers of traders and clerks, and the mechanical groan of maintenance systems intertwine. The city sounds alive, yet beneath the surface lies exhaustion, fear, and quiet despair. Each note is a measure in the symphony of decline, a proof of Seldon's calculations in human terms. Seldon's philosophy is not fatalistic. It recognizes both peril and potential. Patterns can be disrupted by anomalies, by the courageous and the curious, and yet the scale matters. The actions of a few rarely override the behavior of millions. The challenge is to channel innovation, rebellion, and human ingenuity into pathways that preserve civilization rather than accelerate collapse.
Consider, for example, the deliberate design of public ceremonies. They are meant to maintain loyalty, yet they also create rigidity. A leader who follows protocol instead of reason acts predictably, but the population becomes predictable too. The human desire for comfort, for routine, becomes a statistical constant. Civilization is guided not by the will of the people, but by the predictability of their habits. It is efficient, yes, but brittle. In modern terms, parallels are chilling. Algorithms shaping media consumption nudge societies into patterns they cannot easily see. Predictive policing assumes crime will follow historical patterns. Social and financial networks amplify conformity. These systems function well until they do not. The anomaly, the outlier, the unpredictable human element becomes the catalyst for collapse. Trantor's fate is a cautionary mirror. Efficiency does not guarantee resilience. Precision does not equal understanding. Yet Trantor also offers a subtle optimism. Within the city's shadows, anomalies exist. A clerk questions a ledger. A student discovers an overlooked equation. A merchant bends the rules of trade. Each anomaly may seem inconsequential, but in Seldon's equations, they represent leverage points. Civilizations do not survive by avoiding risk entirely. They survive by harnessing unpredictability at the right moments. And this is where the philosophical tension sharpens. Civilization can be predicted, yet it cannot be fully controlled. The question is not whether collapse will occur. Seldon has shown it inevitably will, but how deep the darkness falls and who will navigate it. Knowledge is both weapon and shield. Awareness is both burden and opportunity. The hum of Trantor in this light becomes not just the sound of machinery, but the echo of destiny itself. As the sunless skies of the lower levels darken, imagine the citizens unaware of the equations guiding their lives. The student in her lecture hall, the clerk in his archives, the merchant in his market, all actors in a drama they do not understand.
And yet, in their actions, small, human, unpredictable, they generate the anomalies that will shape the course of history. The city hums, yet beneath it, a storm gathers. Patterns are bending faster than anticipated. The core is oblivious, but the ripple of entropy extends through every sector, touching every world. Civilization teeters on the edge, and only those who recognize the imperceptible signals can act to prevent catastrophe. In that sense, Trantor is alive. It is an organism whose vital signs are subtle, almost invisible. Its arteries pulse with commerce and bureaucracy. Its nerves tingle with rumor, rebellion, and curiosity. And within its heart beats the forbidden equation, waiting for the right hands to guide it, or the wrong ones to shatter it. The philosophical conclusion is unavoidable. Patterns can guide, but they cannot dominate. Knowledge can preserve, but it cannot perfect. Civilization is fragile not because it lacks structure, but because it contains both order and chaos, predictability and anomaly. Trantor, magnificent and doomed, is the ultimate proof, and in its echo, we hear the warning for our own world. Efficiency is seductive. Patterns are compelling, but the human element, messy, emotional, unpredictable, is the ultimate arbiter of fate. In the maze of Trantor's lower levels, the hum of machinery masks the subtle tensions that presage collapse. Urin, the archivist from the previous arc, now realizes his discovery of the fragmentary Seldon equation is more than an academic curiosity. It is a warning. Yet he is only one among countless lives being shaped, constrained, and sometimes subverted by forces he cannot fully comprehend. Far above, in the glittering halls of the core, Prem Palver, the young senator, prepares for a council meeting. Reports flood in from the outer sectors. Trade imbalances, growing unrest, and whispers of rebellion. Prem sees the patterns Seldon predicted, yet every advisor around him insists these anomalies are trivial. One misfiled report here, a delayed fleet there. The core refuses to act, convinced its own gravity can pull the galaxy back into order. Prem feels the weight of knowledge pressing against his chest. He wonders, at what point does inaction become complicity in the Empire's downfall? Meanwhile, in the markets of level 412, Bela, a sharp-minded merchant, senses the subtle shifts in commerce that others overlook. Ships fail to arrive on time, accounts contradict themselves, traders abandon long-standing agreements. Small, human deviations, yet Bela understands they are signs of systemic failure. She begins to prepare, quietly securing networks and alliances in anticipation of instability. Her actions are unnoticed by the bureaucrats above, but they will matter when the cracks widen.
And in a quiet study, Rita, the student of statistics, pores over the fragments of Seldon's writings she has pieced together. She experiences both awe and terror as the magnitude of the plan becomes clear. Civilization is not just fragile, it is mathematically bound to fail unless guided with precision. The weight of knowledge becomes almost unbearable. Her own choices, the future of the galaxy, the collapse of trillions of lives, all mapped in numbers and probabilities. And yet, she feels a spark of agency, a hope that understanding the pattern can influence the outcome. Back in the archives, Urin continues to follow the breadcrumbs of Seldon's logic. His hands tremble as he cross-references shipments, trade records, and census data. Patterns emerge that no one else sees. Micro-rebellions, political shifts, anomalies in resource allocation. And in the margin of one ancient ledger, a note appears in handwriting unfamiliar to him. It reads simply, "Do not trust what is visible." The true danger is unseen. Uran's pulse quickens. He realizes that someone, or something, is aware of his work, and the implications terrify him. If Seldon's equation can be manipulated, or if knowledge falls into the wrong hands, the collapse could accelerate, and the plan could fail entirely. He is not only a witness to history, he is now a participant in a high-stakes game where the fate of the Empire is at risk. The human cost of decline is also visible in smaller, quieter ways. In the factories below, workers move with mechanical precision, repeating the same motions day after day. Many have never seen the sky. Children grow up among machinery, learning routine over curiosity, obedience over creativity. The human spirit persists, but in muted form, like a candle fighting a storm. These are the threads Seldon accounted for, the micro-level variations that form the backdrop of the macro patterns. And yet, they also serve as reminders that even in collapse, life persists, sometimes unpredictably. In the core, a debate escalates between two senior officials over resource allocation. The conversation is technical, focused on percentages and projections. Yet beneath the surface lies desperation. One official recognizes the anomalies spreading through the outer sectors, the subtle erosion of loyalty, the misalignment of trade. The other insists on tradition and ceremony. Neither realizes that the empire's rigidity itself is the enemy. In their argument, the human drama mirrors the larger systemic decay, pride and denial amplifying the risk of catastrophe. At night, when the city quiets for no more than a few hours, Rita sneaks into the archives, poring over decades-old reports and equations. She traces lines of data, following the invisible currents of the galaxy's behavior. Patterns twist and bend in ways that suggest anomalies she had not anticipated. She feels both fear and exhilaration. The plan is fragile, yet elegant. The mathematics are cold, yet imbued with hope. And she senses that a single misstep, one overlooked anomaly, could destabilize everything. Meanwhile, Bela navigates the political and economic web she has begun to construct. She makes alliances with traders, subverts supply chains subtly, and positions herself to influence emerging crises. She understands the stakes intellectually, but the tension gnaws at her. Each choice carries consequences that echo far beyond her immediate perception. The galaxy, vast and intricate, bends subtly to human will or to human error. The tension builds as these threads converge. Uran deciphers a critical part of the Seldon equation, a predictive model of political collapse within the core itself. He understands the mathematics, the inevitability, and the fragility all at once. But before he can act, a shadow falls over him. The archive's lights flicker, a distant alarm echoes faintly, and the machinery's hum warps unnaturally. Someone approaches silently, deliberate and unseen. The intruder's face is concealed. The voice is low, almost casual yet dripping with menace. Do not continue. Stop now, or everything you value will end before you even know it began. Uran freezes. His discoveries, the knowledge that could guide the Empire toward survival, are threatened by forces he cannot identify. He feels the pulse of Trantor around him, thousands of lives, millions of decisions, centuries of order, all imperiled by the unknown. And yet, he also feels a spark of defiance. The plan is fragile, yes, but so is the fear of those who would destroy it. Across Trantor, the galaxy seems unaware of this unfolding drama. The core glitters, the bureaucracy hums, and ordinary citizens live in patterns carefully shaped by centuries of tradition. Yet beneath the veneer, the shadows of collapse grow longer. Traders like Bela prepare, students like Rita awaken to the magnitude of what they study, and clerks like Uran confront dangers invisible to the powerful. The forbidden equation, fragile and potent, exists in the hands of the unlikeliest of actors. The fate of the first Galactic Empire is now entwined with their courage, their choices, and their ability to navigate both knowledge and danger. Every decision, every hesitation, every act of bravery or error will ripple across billions of lives. And then the intruder steps forward, just close enough for Uran to glimpse a glint of something familiar in their eyes, a recognition that chills him to the core. The screen flickers, data streams corrupt, and an alarm shrieks.
The hum of Trantor changes, faster, irregular, as though the planet itself senses that the pattern has shifted. The first crisis is upon them. The plan, though elegant, is not immune to disruption, and somewhere in the core, beyond the reach of any clerk, merchant, or student, the wheels of the empire begin to tremble. The first Galactic Empire, for all its grandeur, is a structure held together by layers of paper, habit, and ritualized authority. From orbit, Trantor gleams like a jewel, a planetary cathedral of civilization, but the shine is deceptive. Beneath its surface, systemic fragility festers, spreading outward to the countless worlds that orbit, depend upon, and pay tribute to the core. Every sector, every governor, every bureaucrat is a thread in the fabric, and yet the weave is thinning. The Seldon crises are no longer theoretical. Across the galaxy, patterns of rebellion, corruption, and mismanagement emerge simultaneously, signaling that the Empire's stability has crossed a threshold. Outer Rim governors defy imperial edicts not out of malice but necessity. Supply lines fail, planetary economies stagnate, and loyalty erodes. These are minor rebellions individually, insignificant in isolation, yet they converge like small sparks in a vast tinderbox threatening to ignite widespread collapse. Even the core, so insulated and arrogant, cannot ignore the subtle tremors. Senators debate endlessly, but their words are increasingly disconnected from the realities of distant worlds. Fleet movements are delayed, convoys misrouted, and the intricate machinery of commerce and governance creaks under pressures no one fully appreciates. The Empire's arrogance blinds it to the early warning signs that history has repeated time and again. Great powers crumble slowly, then suddenly, leaving chaos in their wake. Compare this to empires of old. Rome's late-stage bureaucracies failed to integrate the peripheries. Byzantium fell to court intrigue and fiscal exhaustion. The Ming dynasty lost control over far-flung provinces despite a sophisticated administrative apparatus. Trantor mirrors these failures on a galactic scale. Its strength is its weakness. Size, structure, and centuries of accumulated tradition create both efficiency and brittleness. The very mechanisms designed to preserve order now accelerate entropy. Trade, the lifeblood of the galaxy, falters. Outer systems experience delayed shipments, incomplete manifests, and inconsistent communication. Merchants whisper about routes too dangerous to navigate, about fleets that vanish or fail to arrive. The economy, once predictable, now vibrates with uncertainty. And as commerce fails, politics fail. As politics fail, social cohesion falters. The decay is cascading, systematic, and nearly invisible to the citizens of the core, whose lives are buffered by luxury and ritual. The mathematical elegance of psychohistory reveals another truth. The collapse is inevitable, but the timeline is malleable. The Seldon plan seeks to shorten the ensuing Dark Age, to transform 30 millennia of chaos into a millennium of survival. Yet even Seldon cannot account for anomalies like the mule, individuals with unpredictable abilities who bend human behavior in ways no equation can anticipate. For now, the plan waits in shadow, a hidden guide threading through the galaxy, poised to act only when the crises reach critical thresholds. On Trantor, the bureaucratic machine continues to hum. Clerks shuffle reports, auditors cross-check ledgers, and fleet commanders execute orders with precision. Superficially, the Empire functions. Yet the underlying patterns scream a different story. Power is concentrated in fewer hands. Decision-making is centralized. Information travels slowly, filtered through layers of protocol, and the core, proud and confident, interprets compliance as loyalty, obedience as resilience. But cracks appear in unexpected places. A planetary governor notices subtle deviations in trade reports and begins to act independently, redirecting shipments to preserve his system's stability. A scholar uncovers inconsistencies in census data and begins writing reports warning of population decline on remote colonies. A fleet captain disobeys orders to protect a civilian settlement against rebellion. Individually, these actions seem insignificant. Collectively, they signal the early stages of disruption that psychohistory predicts must occur before the plan can intervene. This is the true genius of Seldon, to see collapse not as chaos, but as opportunity. Each Seldon crisis is a controlled juncture where humanity is forced to choose the path that ensures survival. If the Empire were perfectly stable, there would be no leverage points. Without crisis, civilization cannot be guided. Stability is comforting, but it is also lethally uncreative. Seldon's vision is counterintuitive. Collapse is necessary for rebirth, and only by navigating it intelligently can the Dark Age be shortened. Consider the Corps' leaders. They imagine themselves masters of destiny, immune to the patterns of decline that grip the periphery. They continue elaborate ceremonies, debating minutiae while life decays elsewhere. Their arrogance blinds them to the truth that power without insight is meaningless. And the galaxy, in its vastness, is full of actors who do not adhere to the Corps' rules. Independent traders, resourceful merchants, ambitious military commanders, and the few citizens who recognize the growing instability. This tension between predictability and anomaly defines the next stage of history. The Seldon Plan relies on the predictable patterns of millions to create a stable path forward. Yet the anomalies, the rogue actors, the unforeseen events, the individual choices threaten to derail centuries of preparation. And the Empire, so vast and arrogant, is ill-equipped to recognize or correct these deviations until they reach crisis magnitude. On thousands of planets, whispers of change circulate. Citizens notice supply shortages. Scholars question official histories. Traders adjust their routes, seeking to avoid instability. Loyalty is no longer assumed, it is negotiated and fragile. And yet the Corps remains confident, interpreting these minor disturbances as routine variants rather than the first tremors of collapse. The mathematical inevitability of decline unfolds quietly, almost imperceptibly. Fleet logs, tax reports, population data, each is a variable in Seldon's equation, each a reflection of humanity's collective behavior. When anomalies converge, the crises will arrive with force. And for now, the galaxy watches obliviously, unaware that its fate is being guided by calculations hidden from view. The Seldon Plan's brilliance is its subtlety. Crises are not avoided, they are engineered, anticipated, and timed to maximize the probability that civilization will endure. Yet for this to succeed, the individuals navigating the crises must recognize the inflection points, act wisely, and harness anomalies without being consumed by them. The stakes could not be higher: the survival of knowledge, culture, and organized civilization itself. And so, the stage is set for the coming arcs. Trantor glitters in the distance, a jewel of civilization concealing cracks invisible to all but the most observant. The periphery brims with unrest and uncertainty. The Seldon crises wait like trapdoors in the galaxy's floor, poised to test humanity's capacity for insight, courage, and adaptation. And the forbidden equation, quietly hidden in archives and minds alike, pulses with potential. The promise of salvation or the threat of accelerated collapse. The question, unspoken but omnipresent, hangs over every world. Can civilization navigate the convergence of chaos and destiny, or will the first Galactic Empire fall as all great powers before it have done? Step into the crowded streets of Trantor's mid-levels, and you feel the pulse of a civilization at once magnificent and precarious. The air vibrates with the hum of thousands of machines. Lev cars glide silently along suspended highways, energy conduits hum overhead, and the scent of synthetic vegetation mingles with ozone and the faint tang of recycled water. Every sound, every smell, every motion is a reminder of humanity's ingenuity, but also of its fragility. Here, sensory immersion reveals what mathematics alone cannot. The empire is alive, but it is an organism under stress. Citizens move with purpose, yet many are unaware of the patterns guiding them. Clerks shuffle reports mechanically. Merchants haggle over prices that are becoming meaningless, and soldiers patrol districts where unrest simmers. Each action contributes to a vast, invisible web, one that Seldon's equations have traced long before anyone noticed the cracks. The hum of bureaucracy dominates the soundscape, a low-frequency vibration that resonates through metal corridors and observation decks alike. It is the heartbeat of civilization, steady yet artificial, masking the stirrings of entropy. Beneath it, whispers travel, rumors of rebellion in the outer sectors, anomalies in fleet coordination, shortages of essential resources. The core dismisses them as trivial. The periphery knows they are life or death. The auditory tension of Trantor mirrors the philosophical tension of the empire itself. Appearances maintain stability, but reality bends beneath the surface. Visual contrasts reinforce the message. Towers of gleaming metal and glass rise into artificial skies above, while the lower levels are a labyrinth of steel, shadow, and grime. Citizens who dwell in the upper tiers enjoy luxuries unimaginable to those below. Curated food, light filtered to mimic distant suns, climate-controlled air, even artificial rivers that flow endlessly. Below, workers toil in perpetual twilight, managing the systems that maintain the core's illusion of control. Trantor is a city of extremes, a civilization simultaneously thriving and decaying. Philosophically, this juxtaposition raises profound questions. How can a society so brilliant produce such fragility? What does it mean for human knowledge to be preserved yet underutilized? Trantor is a cautionary tale. Civilizations may excel at creating order, but without reflection, awareness, and adaptability, order becomes brittle. Knowledge without wisdom, discipline without judgment, and scale without insight sow the seeds of collapse. Consider the city's markets. The air is thick with spices, synthetic perfumes, and the acrid tang of machinery. Traders shout, children weave through the crowds, and holographic advertisements flicker across vertical screens. Yet beneath the vibrant chaos lies systemic decay. Trade networks fail silently. Shipments arrive late or not at all. Merchants like Bela adapt, rerouting resources and securing alliances, but the grid of interdependence frays. In this microcosm, the empire's fragility is tangible. Life continues, yet the mechanisms that sustain it are eroding. This sensory and philosophical exploration mirrors our modern world. Cities hum with surveillance, algorithms predict behavior, and commerce flows along invisible patterns. We may perceive stability, yet beneath the surface, subtle shifts ripple through global networks. The lesson of Trantor is immediate. Efficiency and scale create both power and vulnerability. Predictable systems are tempting, yet it is unpredictability, the anomalies, that determine the trajectory of civilizations. Step into a lecture hall on Trantor's mid-levels. A professor of history gestures at a holographic projection of the galaxy, highlighting trade routes and population centers. Students take notes dutifully, yet few question the assumptions underlying the charts. Knowledge is transmitted, yes, but comprehension is shallow. This is the essence of systemic decay. Information persists, yet insight is scarce. Seldon recognized this centuries earlier, calculating not just probabilities of collapse, but the human tendencies that exacerbate it. The philosophy deepens further when observing human behavior in moments of crisis. Citizens adapt in small, improvisational ways. A clerk reroutes a shipment to avoid shortages. A student uncovers an inconsistency in a ledger. A merchant shifts alliances to protect trade. These actions are unpredictable, yet they matter enormously in the aggregate. Civilization depends not only on laws, protocols, and hierarchies, but also on the creativity and moral judgment of individuals who recognize and respond to anomalies. Sound, scent, and sight converge to produce an immersive narrative of decline. The roar of machinery, the scent of burnt circuitry mingled with synthetic flora, and the constant visual contrast between glittering towers and shadowed alleys form a sensory metaphor for the Empire's duality: grand yet decaying, visible yet fragile. Trantor is both triumph and warning, a civilization whose brilliance is inseparable from its vulnerability. Modern parallels sharpen the philosophical insight. Our world, too, relies on vast systems, global supply chains, data networks, and centralized institutions. These networks hum, often unnoticed, yet subtle disruptions, a port closure, a cyber attack, a market crash, can ripple with consequences disproportionate to their scale. Trantor's collapse is not an alien story. It is a mirror, magnified across time and space, reminding us that civilization is a delicate dance between order and chaos. Within this sensory and philosophical framework, human agency becomes paramount. The plan relies on actors like Uran, Rita, Bela, and Preem Palver, individuals whose choices, courage, and insight can amplify or mitigate the unfolding crises. Each decision is a node in a network that determines whether collapse will be catastrophic or guided toward recovery. Here, philosophy meets action. Knowledge alone is insufficient. Awareness must translate into intervention. Even the city's architecture reinforces the lesson. Towers, corridors, and spires embody stability, yet their rigidity mirrors the rigidity of the Empire's institutions. Sublevels snake beneath, dark and winding, echoing the complexities and unpredictabilities that bureaucracy cannot fully contain. The Empire's structure is both protective and constrictive, a physical representation of Seldon's equations. Patterns guide, but anomalies always exist. As night falls, Trantor transforms. Lights shimmer like distant stars, reflecting off steel and glass. Shadows grow longer in sublevels, hiding both danger and opportunity. The sensory contrasts, glimmering luxury above, shadowed toil below, reinforce the philosophical tension. Stability is superficial, and chaos is inevitable. Yet within the shadows, those who perceive the patterns may act, shaping the outcome of crises before they explode into catastrophe. The forbidden equation pulses like a heartbeat beneath the city, present in fragments, waiting to be understood and applied. It is both a warning and a tool, a reminder that civilization is not eternal, yet also a roadmap for survival. Those who grasp its significance, clerks, scholars, traders, students, become the hidden agents of history, the arbiters of outcomes unseen by the core. Trantor hums, alive in sound, scent, and motion, yet the philosophical truth is inescapable. No empire, however vast, however brilliant, escapes the patterns of entropy. Collapse is a process, not an event, and it is visible to those who know where and how to look. The sensory richness of the city provides insight, and the human anomalies embedded within its fabric create both risk and hope. And so, the stage is set for personal stories to intersect with systemic crises. The empire teeters, and the individuals who recognize anomalies become the fulcrum on which history may pivot. Their awareness, courage, and actions will determine whether the Seldon plan succeeds or fails. The philosophy is clear. Knowledge is power, but action is destiny. In the sublevels of Trantor, far below the glittering towers, Uran moves with deliberate caution through endless corridors of archives. Each step echoes softly against metal walls, each breath carried through recycled air that smells faintly of ozone and machine oil. He carries not just data, but responsibility, fragments of Seldon's forbidden equation, a thread connecting human behavior to the fate of billions. One misstep could accelerate collapse, yet inaction is equally dangerous. Above him, the core operates in blissful ignorance. Prem Palver presides over a council meeting in a hall that gleams with artificial sunlight. Senators argue about minor decrees, debating ceremonial details, while the outer sectors suffer disruptions invisible to them. Prem senses the undercurrents, the trade irregularities, the delayed fleet orders, but no one else listens. The core's arrogance blinds them to patterns they cannot yet perceive. In the marketplace of level 412, Bela navigates the crowded walkways, her senses finely tuned to anomalies. Shipments fail to arrive, prices fluctuate unpredictably, and rumors of rebellion circulate among traders. She shifts alliances quietly, rerouting trade to stabilize her network. In doing so, she becomes both observer and actor, threading herself into the web of cause and effect that shapes the galaxy's destiny. Every choice carries weight, every decision ripples outward in ways even she cannot calculate. Meanwhile, Rita sits in the lecture halls, poring over decades of archival data. Her hands shake slightly as she pieces together Seldon's calculations, tracing predictive patterns across worlds and centuries. The plan's logic is elegant, yet terrifying. Civilization's survival depends on navigating crises that are mathematically inevitable, and within that knowledge lies the paradox of human agency. Even as patterns constrain behavior, the choices of a few may redirect the trajectory of the entire galaxy. The human cost is unmistakable. In the lower levels, workers toil endlessly, unaware that their small deviations, miscounts, shortcuts, whispered complaints might be the very anomalies the plan relies upon. Children play in shadowed corridors, oblivious to the broader collapse. The city functions, yet beneath the hum of machinery, the pulse of systemic decay quickens. Trantor is alive, but it is a living organism on the edge of failure. Even within the bureaucracy, tension mounts. A senior official notices discrepancies in the fleet logs, an inconsistency too subtle to be noticed by routine audits. His voice shakes as he brings it to the council's attention, only to be dismissed by those in power. Insignificant, they say, yet history has taught that the smallest neglect can cascade into catastrophe. And in that dismissal lies a profound human drama, the arrogance of certainty versus the peril of unseen patterns. The intersection of these personal stories grows more perilous. Uran discovers a series of anomalies that could destabilize multiple sectors simultaneously. He knows the plan anticipates such deviations, yet he cannot predict whether the outcomes will align with Seldon's vision. Bela, recognizing trade irregularities in her routes, adjusts her strategies, unknowingly influencing events hundreds of light-years away. Rita connects equations with real-world consequences, grappling with a burden that no human being has ever carried before. As the threads of agency converge, the first crisis emerges. A fleet, dispatched to enforce imperial authority on a remote sector, encounters resistance unexpectedly coordinated and intelligent. Reports flood Trantor with fragmented, contradictory data. Prem. Palver listens to the chaos unfold, realizing that the anomalies he had sensed are now manifesting with violent consequences. Panic hums beneath the council's veneer of control, and then the unexpected strikes. Uran's careful analysis, meant to safeguard the plan, triggers attention from those who would manipulate it. In the archives, lights flicker, alarms hum, and a shadowed figure steps from the corridors, moving with purpose. The intruder knows more than Uran, and their presence is a direct threat to the fragile stability he has sought to preserve.
Stop, the figure says, voice low and commanding. Every move you make shifts the balance. Do you understand what you are risking? Uran freezes, realizing that knowledge alone is insufficient. The plan, elegant though it may be, is vulnerable in the hands of individuals whose motives are opaque. The galaxy's fate now rests on a collision of intellect, courage, and chance. Simultaneously, Bela faces a different danger. Traders loyal to the core begin targeting her shipments, seeing her maneuvers as rebellion. She navigates shadowed alleys and hidden docks, aware that a single misstep could destroy the network she has painstakingly built. Each choice is a gamble, a thread in the weave of the Empire's survival, or its accelerated collapse. Rita, still immersed in calculations, begins to perceive anomalies in the data she cannot account for. Patterns twist unexpectedly, probabilities shift. She senses an intelligence acting outside the plan, an unpredictable force capable of altering outcomes across sectors. Her realization is electrifying and terrifying. The mathematics are not absolute. Human will, mutation, and chance can disrupt even the most elegant designs. Meanwhile, in the core, Preem Palver confronts the realization that the Empire's structures are failing. Orders are ignored, fleets are lost, and communication across systems falters. The arrogance of centuries, the confidence in eternal stability, begins to crumble. For the first time, a core official perceives that the Empire may not survive its own rigidity. The convergence of human stories, anomalies, and systemic fragility reaches a climax in the archives. Uran faces the intruder, a figure whose eyes gleam with knowledge and intent. Words are exchanged, terse and dangerous, yet actions speak louder. The intruder steps closer, and the air seems to vibrate with tension. Outside, alarms echo across Trantor, signaling disturbances in multiple sectors simultaneously. The threads of history, human agency, and chaos intertwine in ways that no one can fully anticipate. A message arrives, blinking across Uran's console. Critical systems compromised. Immediate intervention required. His hands tremble as he processes the scale of what is unfolding. Across the galaxy, anomalies converge. Rebellions, trade collapses, fleet failures, and the subtle but growing awareness that the Empire is no longer fully in control of its destiny. In that moment, the human element crystallizes. Citizens, clerks, traders, scholars, all previously unaware, now stand at the center of the galaxy's fate. Their choices, courageous or hesitant, deliberate or accidental, determine the outcome of crises that Seldon predicted centuries ago. Every action is a variable, every decision a potential pivot between collapse and salvation. And then, just as Uran takes a decisive step toward action, the intruder reveals their identity, one tied to the very anomalies Seldon's plan cannot predict. Recognition flashes across Uran's mind. The patterns are shifting, the plan's elegance is threatened, and the first true Seldon crisis has begun. The fate of the Empire, and the future of civilization, hangs on the choices of a few individuals in a galaxy that seems oblivious to its own peril. The hum of Trantor intensifies, shadows deepen. The city, magnificent and fragile, trembles beneath the weight of unfolding events. The forbidden equation pulses unseen, waiting for hands capable of wielding it wisely or recklessly. And the galaxy watches silently, unaware that the first domino has already fallen. The first Galactic Empire, vast and ancient, now shows cracks that were invisible for millennia. From orbit, Trantor shines, a city-planet of impossible scale, yet beneath its glittering surface, patterns of decay accelerate. The bureaucracy, once the backbone of civilization, now functions more as a weight than a support, slowing responses and amplifying misjudgments. The galaxy begins to hum with quiet disruptions. Outer rim systems teetering on the edge, minor rebellions sparking in unexpected sectors, and trade networks faltering in ways even the most experienced governors cannot fully predict. These disruptions are not random. They are the earliest Seldon crises manifesting in real time. Every anomaly is a ripple in the ocean of human behavior, a small deviation from the statistical patterns that have kept the empire afloat. Seldon predicted these movements centuries ago, and his plan was designed to channel them towards survival. But prediction is not control. Even as crises emerge, human ambition, fear, and error introduce variables beyond any mathematical certainty. Consider the core itself. Senators argue endlessly over procedural matters, blind to the dissonance in communications from the periphery. Fleets, meticulously maintained and disciplined, now arrive late or misaligned, as subtle errors cascade through complex logistical networks. The empire, confident in its own invulnerability, misreads the signals. Authority is assumed, but compliance is slipping. Power, vast as it may be, cannot entirely suppress chaos. Meanwhile, the outer sectors seethe with opportunity and rebellion. Governors act independently. Merchants bend trade to protect their interests, and scholars uncover truths ignored by the core. Each sector's deviation is insignificant alone, yet collectively they shape the trajectory of the galaxy. The elegance of Seldon's mathematics lies in its recognition of this scale. Micro-level anomalies can influence macro-level outcomes, provided they intersect with the right crises at the right time. Key figures begin to emerge in this period of early instability. Bila, the merchant, adapts to shifting trade patterns with cunning precision, becoming a force that stabilizes certain regions while destabilizing others in subtle ways. Uran, the archivist, pieces together fragments of forbidden equations, aware that every discovery places him in jeopardy, yet simultaneously equips him to act decisively. Rita, the student, begins to perceive patterns in historical data and contemporary behavior that foreshadow the unfolding crises. And Prem Palver, in the core, wrestles with the first inklings of systemic failure, a realization others are too arrogant to acknowledge. These individuals illustrate a fundamental truth. The Seldon plan is not a map of inevitability, but a framework of probabilities. While collapse is certain, the timing, severity, and shape of the crises can be influenced. Action, or inaction, by key actors will either accelerate chaos or preserve civilization. It is a game played not with armies or fleets, but with insight, courage, and timing. History offers parallels. Rome, in its final centuries, struggled to maintain control over distant provinces even as its bureaucratic center labored under inefficiency and corruption. Byzantium witnessed the gradual corrosion of centralized authority, even while wealth and ceremonial grandeur persisted. The Ming dynasty faced rebellion and fiscal crisis, its power concentrated yet brittle. Trantor mirrors these examples on a galactic scale, magnifying both the stakes and the consequences of failure. The philosophical tension deepens when considering the nature of power and knowledge. The core assumes stability will continue indefinitely, relying on centuries of ritualized governance to sustain authority. Yet the outer sectors demonstrate that control is not inherent to position. It emerges from perception, adaptability, and understanding. The galaxy is not merely governed by law or military might. It is a complex web of human behavior, where the smallest deviation can precipitate outcomes that no statute or strategy could anticipate. Trade routes illustrate this beautifully. In the rimward sectors, a convoy fails to arrive, not due to enemy action, but to miscommunication and independent action by a local governor. Merchants like Bela adjust instantly, rerouting shipments to minimize loss while exploiting the disruption for advantage. Such events ripple outward, affecting populations, fleets, and political decisions across multiple systems.
The galaxy, vast as it is, behaves as a single organism, responding to perturbations in ways that blend predictability and chaos. Military maneuvers similarly reflect the Empire's tension. Fleets follow protocol with precision, yet when faced with anomalies, unexpected resistance, logistic failure, or even chance encounters, their effectiveness declines sharply. Commanders, trained in centuries of routine, confront the limits of standard operating procedures. It is here, at the intersection of discipline and unpredictability, that the first Seldon crises ignite. These are moments when human intuition, courage, and decisiveness matter as much as fleets, soldiers, or bureaucratic authority. The first tremors of large-scale rebellion emerge subtly but unmistakably. In one sector, a minor uprising spreads faster than expected, fueled not by ideology but by cumulative neglect, trade shortages, and human frustration. In another, a fleet fails to intercept a rogue merchant convoy, inadvertently empowering local factions. The Empire, vast and confident, begins to perceive these events as isolated anomalies rather than interconnected signs of systemic fragility. And yet, the Seldon Plan relies on precisely this interplay. Crises must occur, but they must be manageable to guide civilization toward recovery. In the core, Prem Palver senses the growing disconnect. Information reaches him filtered, delayed, and sanitized. Orders are obeyed in form, but often ignored in substance. The illusion of control masks the reality of systemic decay. Here lies the paradox of Trantor's brilliance. The mechanisms of order that built the Empire now obscure the signals of decline, making insight difficult and rare. Only those willing to perceive patterns beyond protocol, scholars, traders, observant clerks, can intervene effectively. And so, across the galaxy, the stage is set. Trantor's glittering spires conceal the fragility beneath. Outer worlds tremble with unrest. Key actors emerge, unaware of the full magnitude of their influence. And the first true Seldon crises approach, poised to test humanity's capacity for foresight, courage, and adaptation. The Empire, immense and ancient, faces a reckoning. Its collapse is not immediate, but its trajectory is clear. The hum of bureaucracy, the rhythm of trade, the pulse of military order, each is a thread in a tapestry about to unravel. Civilization stands at the edge of transformation, and the question is no longer whether it will falter, but how much of it will endure. The galaxy waits, silent and vast, while patterns shift and crises converge. The Seldon Plan, elegant and hidden, begins to assert itself, yet its success depends entirely on the actions of a few, scattered and unaware. Trantor's brilliance becomes a mirror for fragility, and the stage is set for choices whose consequences will echo across millennia. Night falls across Trantor, though night is a construct, a rhythm of artificial light cycling across the spires and corridors of the core. The city hums with mechanical life, a low, omnipresent vibration that permeates every level. It is the sound of civilization itself. Machinery, bureaucrats, trade, and commerce intertwining into a singular organism. Yet beneath this hum lies a dissonance that grows with each passing cycle, imperceptible to most, but glaring to those who look closely. In the lower levels, workers move like shadows along narrow corridors. The smell of heated metal, recycled air, and faint chemical emissions hangs heavy. Children play between conveyor belts and maintenance bays, their laughter fragile against the constant drone of machinery. Even in these peripheral zones, life continues, stubborn and adaptive. Yet the patterns of decay ripple through these streets, and the small improvisations of individuals, rerouting supplies, correcting errors, alerting neighbors, carry consequences far beyond the immediate moment. Sensory immersion makes the philosophical stakes tangible. Trantor's splendor, The towering spires, glimmering observation domes, and artificial rivers exists alongside shadowed alleys, rusting conduits, and neglected sublevels. The contrast is stark, civilization at its zenith, yet simultaneously at the edge of collapse. What does it mean for a society to be brilliant yet fragile, to create order on an unimaginable scale, only to find that scale itself breeds vulnerability? Trantor's architectural dichotomy mirrors its political and social realities. The core believes itself eternal, insulated by centuries of tradition, hierarchy, and ceremony. The outer sectors, however, experience disruption daily. Delays in supplies, mismanaged fleets, sporadic rebellion. Humans, acting individually, introduce anomalies that ripple across systems. These micro-variations, so small they are often invisible to the core, carry the power to alter the trajectory of the entire empire. Knowledge without application is impotent, wisdom without perception is wasted, and structure without flexibility becomes brittle. Consider the markets of level 412. Holographic advertisements flicker in the neon haze. Traders shout above the hum of automated delivery systems, and exotic goods from dozens of sectors exchange hands. Amid the bustle, Bela navigates carefully, her senses calibrated to detect anomalies in supply and demand. She senses shortages before anyone else does, adjusts routes, and subtly manipulates alliances. To the untrained eye, she is simply a merchant. To the plan, she is a critical variable. Her every choice sends ripples through trade, governance, and the emergent Seldon crises themselves. Sound amplifies the philosophical tension. The hum of machinery, the rhythmic clatter of data terminals, the distant roar of air ducts, these are the auditory manifestations of order. But overlaying them are whispers of chaos. Misrouted shipments, inconsistent fleet logs, rumors of unrest. Trantor's sensory fabric reflects its philosophical one. Appearances of stability mask the turbulence beneath. Civilization is not just a political entity. It is a living system sensitive to anomalies, resilient yet vulnerable. Modern parallels emerge clearly. Our world relies on massive, complex networks, global supply chains, financial systems, digital communication that appear stable until subtle disruptions cascade catastrophically. A single delay in a port, a cyber attack, or a policy miscalculation can ripple worldwide. Trantor magnifies this dynamic. The scale is galactic, the stakes immense, but the principles are strikingly familiar. Predictable systems tempt hubris, yet vulnerability hides in the fine details of human behavior. Philosophically, the tension is deeper still. Humans value stability, yet innovation and survival demand crisis. Seldon's plan hinges on this paradox. Collapse is inevitable, but it must be navigated intelligently to shorten the dark age. The crises are pre-designed inflection points, forcing civilization to choose paths that preserve knowledge, culture, and coordination. Without anomaly, there is no opportunity for redirection. Without crisis, there is no leverage. Stability, comforting though it may seem, can be lethally stagnant. In the upper levels of Trantor, Prem Palver observes the patterns indirectly. Artificial sunlight bathes the council chambers in warm gold, but his mind tracks disruptions in fleets, trade, and governance. He feels the fragility beneath the grandeur. Decisions taken in isolation, protocols followed blindly, and bureaucratic pride all threaten systemic collapse. To intervene wisely, he must see beyond appearances, anticipate emergent patterns, and act decisively. A philosophical test as much as a practical one. Meanwhile, Rita immerses herself in Seldon's mathematics, tracing predictive lines across decades of historical data and contemporary events. Equations pulse with probability, elegance, and peril. She feels the paradox acutely. The plan is both rigid and fluid, deterministic in aggregate, yet contingent on anomalies. Every micro-decision, Bela rerouting trade, Uran protecting archives, Preem overriding procedure, intersects with macro-scale patterns. Civilization survival is not only statistical, it is human, emergent, and unpredictable. Even the tactile elements of the city reinforce the lesson. The cold metal of corridors, the vibration of transport conduits, the faint scent of recycled water and synthetic flora, all remind inhabitants that the empire is a human artifact, dependent on design, maintenance, and perception. Machines hum, but humans act. Structures endure, but only insofar as the decisions of individuals sustain them. The philosophical resonance is clear. Systems are powerful, yet their power depends on attentive, adaptive stewardship. The sensory and philosophical layers converge in moments of subtle crisis. A fleet captain notes irregular patterns in supply requests. A merchant detects deviations in trade manifests. A clerk finds conflicting census reports. Individually, these events seem minor. Collectively, they signal early Seldon crises. Civilization teeters not from cataclysmic destruction, but from the accumulation of micro-anomalies that challenge predictability, authority, and resilience. In every corridor, every market, and every council chamber, the galaxy vibrates with potential. Knowledge is available, but comprehension is scarce. Power exists, but insight is rare. Civilization endures through observation, adaptation, and foresight. The philosophical lesson of Trantor is unyielding. Survival is not guaranteed by wealth, scale, or authority alone. It requires awareness, courage, and the ability to act amid uncertainty. As night deepens, the city hums with contrast. Glittering towers glow, artificial rivers reflect light like liquid gold, and shadows grow long in sublevels. The sensory experience mirrors the philosophical tension. Brilliance coexists with decay, order with entropy, perception with hidden peril. Every sound, sight, and smell reminds the citizens that civilization is a living system, fragile yet resilient, elegant yet vulnerable. The Seldon plan waits. Quiet and unseen, pulsing in hidden archives, in the minds of perceptive citizens, and in the subtle deviations of human behavior, the crises will arrive soon, testing intellect, courage, and morality. Trantor hums, alive and fragile, and the philosophical truth is clear. Collapse is inevitable, but survival is contingent on awareness, wisdom, and action. Bela crouches beside a malfunctioning Levship dock on the rimward edge of Trantor, her hands moving with swift precision. The hum of machinery vibrates through the platform, mingling with the distant cries of dock workers and the metallic tang of ozone. A shipment critical to several outer sectors is delayed. Every hour of inaction risks a cascade of failures. She knows the Empire's bureaucrats will never understand the urgency, nor the human improvisation required to stabilize it. This is survival at the edge, improvisation where rules fail and structure frays. Uran, deep in the sublevel archives, senses the pulse of the galaxy through lines of data and fragments of forbidden equations. His fingertips hover over terminals, scanning fleet reports and trade manifests, aware that a single overlooked anomaly could unravel months of careful calculation. The air smells of recycled ozone and ink. Every breath reminds him of the stakes, the preservation of knowledge, culture, and civilization itself. The plan depends on him acting at the right moment, yet every choice carries danger, uncertainty, and moral weight. Meanwhile, Rita traces anomalies in Seldon's predictive charts, connecting subtle deviations across centuries of records. A merchant route delayed in the rimward sectors intersects with an unanticipated rebellion, producing a chain reaction that the Empire's core fails to perceive. She senses the mathematical elegance of the plan, but also its fragility. One uncalculated variable, a fleet delayed, a governor's independent decision, a single trader's improvisation, could redirect the trajectory of history. The weight of inevitability and the peril of choice press on her simultaneously. Across the galaxy, fleets encounter unexpected resistance. On a remote planet, a lieutenant notices patterns in civilian movements, the subtle alignment of townsfolk and militia. He hesitates, uncertain whether to follow orders from a distant, overconfident command or adapt to the moment. In hesitation lies the power to preserve or destroy. Every choice in these outer sectors is amplified, every anomaly magnified in consequence. The plan is not abstract, it unfolds through the tangible decisions of humans who neither know nor trust the mathematics guiding them. Back on Trantor, Preem Palver convenes an emergency council. Artificial sunlight illuminates the chamber, yet his mind focuses on shadows, the inconsistencies, the anomalies, the subtle failures rippling through the galaxy. Senior officials insist on procedure, unaware that protocol now hampers survival. Palver's voice rises not in command but in warning. Human awareness must replace ritual. Insight must override assumption. The senators nod politely, yet comprehension is rare. In the sublevels, Uran's discoveries draw attention. A shadowed figure slips between corridors, alert and purposeful. Uran senses knowledge, intent, and danger in equal measure. Words are unnecessary. The tension is in the shared understanding that the slightest misstep could alter the trajectory of entire sectors. The intruder knows the plan, yet their motives are opaque, their allegiance unknown. Trust and deception become indistinguishable. Bela faces her own peril. Traders loyal to the core perceive her rerouting efforts as rebellion. The scent of burning cargo fills the air as one shipment is intercepted. The hum of alarms reverberates through the docks. She maneuvers through shadowed alleys, calculating the risk of every path, aware that a single mistake could undo her stabilizing influence. Improvisation becomes instinct, and instinct becomes survival. Rita's calculations yield a horrifying insight. An anomaly appears simultaneously in multiple sectors, threatening to converge into a crisis beyond what even Seldon anticipated. Her hands tremble as she marks deviations on her holographic charts. The mathematics are elegant but incomplete. The human factor introduces uncertainty, chaos, and moral ambiguity. One decision, a fleet's reroute, a shipment's diversion, a governor's defiance, can reshape outcomes across thousands of worlds. The human cost is palpable. Families in the outer sectors scramble to cope with shortages, while bureaucrats on Trantor debate ceremonial minutiae. Scholars and clerks risk their lives preserving fragments of knowledge, often unnoticed. Traders like Bela manipulate commerce with surgical precision, threading through anomalies with both fear and skill. Across every level of society, ordinary actions, an unreported delay, a whispered warning, a small act of courage become extraordinary, shaping the fate of civilization. The first Seldon crisis erupts fully. In a rimward sector, rebellion and economic disruption converge. Fleet reinforcements arrive too late, trading alliances fracture, and civilian panic spreads. On Trantor, Uran's intruder strikes, seizing critical archival data. Preem Palver realizes that the Empire's apparent control is an illusion. The systems are faltering under the weight of human unpredictability. Across the galaxy, crises intersect in ways both predictable and shocking. And then comes the final moment of convergence. Uran confronts the intruder in a corridor of humming terminals and flickering lights. Recognition sparks. This figure is not just an anomaly, but a catalyst, a variable that Seldon's plan could not fully anticipate. Bela, rerouting a convoy, realizes her decisions now affect multiple crises simultaneously. Rita sees her predictive models collapsing under the weight of converging anomalies. Preem Palver senses the Empire teetering, its centuries of tradition unable to withstand the pressure. Every story, every decision, every microaction threads together in an almost invisible web. Civilization balances precariously on choices made in shadowed alleys, council chambers, and remote starports. The crises are not abstract, they are immediate, human, and dangerous. And the forbidden equation pulses silently, a guide whose success depends entirely on perception, courage, and the unforeseen power of individual action. In the corridors of Trantor, Uran steps toward the intruder, aware that what happens next may determine the outcome of an entire Seldon crisis. The city hums, the air vibrates with tension, and somewhere in the rimward sectors, fleets and merchants teeter on the edge of chaos. Every action, however small, has amplified consequence. The galaxy waits, silent and immense, while the first true test of human agency collides with the inevitability of collapse. The final words echo in Uran's mind, a question unspoken but omnipresent. Will the plan survive the choices of individuals whose motives, courage, and perception remain uncertain? And then, just as he makes a decisive move, the corridor plunges into darkness. Alarms blare, consoles spark, and a single thought crystallizes across the minds of the key actors. The first Seldon crisis has begun in earnest, and the galaxy holds its breath. The galaxy feels simultaneously infinite and intimately connected. Trantor, the core of the first Galactic Empire, gleams with impossible scale, yet far-flung rimward systems experience disruptions invisible from the capital. The first true Seldon crises have begun, and the delicate balance of human behavior and mathematics is now in motion. Across sectors, trade collapses, fleets falter, and rebellion simmers. Each event, insignificant in isolation, threads together into a network of cascading consequences, a web that only Seldon could have foreseen. The core maintains the illusion of stability. Senators deliberate over protocol, fleets move with apparent precision, and bureaucratic machinery churns tirelessly. Yet every subsystem exhibits subtle flaws, misrouted orders, delayed reports, and human hesitation amplify systemic fragility. The Empire's immense bureaucracy, which once guaranteed dominance, now hinders adaptability. Power, immense though it is, cannot prevent the inevitable drift toward instability. Rimward, crises converge in tangible ways. Minor rebellions flare across multiple sectors. Merchant convoys vanish or reappear unpredictably. Fleets encounter unexpected resistance or find themselves misaligned. Governors act independently, trading allegiance for local stability, introducing variables the core cannot account for. The galaxy's complexity, its scale and interdependence, renders centralized authority increasingly ineffective. The pattern Seldon predicted is emerging. Collapse is not immediate but inevitable, accelerated by human action and misperception. Key figures shape outcomes. Bela's networks stabilize some regions while unintentionally destabilizing others. Uran, deep in the archives, monitors the shifting variables, realizing that human initiative, both deliberate and accidental, can accelerate or delay crises. Rita's predictive models detect convergences across sectors, showing how anomalies propagate, and Prem Palver, at the core, begins to grasp the limits of centralized control. The plan depends on these scattered actors, whose awareness and action are critical to mitigating collapse. The Seldon crises reveal themselves not as abstract equations, but as tangible events with immediate consequences. A rimward governor, acting to protect his sector, inadvertently reroutes trade, preventing famine in one system while exacerbating it in another. A fleet captain disobeys orders, diverting forces to protect civilians, creating vulnerabilities elsewhere. Merchants like Bela exploit disruptions, stabilizing commerce in some regions and destabilizing it in others. Every action is a node in the web of cause and effect, demonstrating the profound interplay between prediction and human choice. Trantor's grand spires and sublevels mirror the unfolding dynamics. The upper tiers, insulated and orderly, shine with artifice and certainty. Artificial rivers reflect sunlight, corridors gleam with polished steel, and ceremonial halls echo with tradition. Beneath, sublevels vibrate with improvisation and adaptation. Clerks reroute reports, workers manage malfunctioning machinery, and shadows conceal both opportunity and threat. Civilization thrives and frays simultaneously. Brilliance coexists with fragility, and order conceals chaos. History offers insight. Rome's late centuries demonstrate how distant provinces can drift from central authority, introducing chaos that even imperial oversight struggles to correct. Byzantium's ceremonial grandeur masked administrative decay, while Ming China's wealth concealed vulnerability to rebellion and mismanagement. Trantor amplifies these dynamics to a galactic scale. Civilization is vast, knowledge abundant, yet fragility multiplies with size, complexity, and arrogance. Philosophically, these events raise enduring questions. What is the nature of power when authority cannot perceive subtle deviations? How does civilization balance efficiency with adaptability, structure with flexibility? Trantor is both a triumph and a warning. Human systems can achieve the unimaginable, but only at the cost of blind spots and latent fragility. Knowledge, wisdom, and action are required in tandem to navigate complexity. Failure in any dimension imperils the whole. The Seldon plan accounts for these dynamics through precise, preordained crises. Each is a flashpoint, a moment in which human choices intersect with systemic pressures to produce outcomes that preserve civilization's core. Yet the crises are also tests of perception, courage, and moral judgment. Even actors aware of the plan must make decisions with incomplete information, often under stress, danger, or personal risk. The emergent consequences are both inevitable and unpredictable, a tension between determinism and free will at the scale of the galaxy. Fleets move through rimward sectors, patrolling, enforcing, and reacting. Yet even seasoned commanders struggle to maintain control. Reports arrive out of sequence. Local allies betray expectations. Trade routes collapse under pressure. The orchestration of stability becomes impossible without insight into anomalies. Observers like Bela, Uran, and Rita become critical nodes. Their perception and action determine whether crises spiral into catastrophe or remain contained. Civilization, in essence, is now in the hands of those who understand patterns and are willing to act. The interplay between prediction and unpredictability drives the narrative. Each event amplifies or mitigates subsequent anomalies. A shipment delayed by weather triggers a rebellion in one sector. A fleet miscommunication reshapes trade in another. The core's illusions of order crumble as the emergent dynamics exceed centralized comprehension. Trantor, magnificent and immense, stands as both center and symbol, brilliance and fragility intertwined. Meanwhile, Seldon's equations pulse quietly in hidden archives. They anticipate crises, calculate probabilities, and outline potential outcomes. Yet their success relies not on omniscience, but on the interplay of human decision-making with predicted patterns. Micro-decisions from clerks, merchants, scholars, and officials cascade through the system, shaping events at scales far beyond individual comprehension. Civilization is statistical yet profoundly human. The first Seldon crises escalate. A rimward rebellion spreads faster than anticipated. Fleets fail to respond in coordination, and trade disruptions amplify shortages across multiple systems. On Trantor, Uran detects emergent patterns too subtle for the core to perceive, while Bela maneuvers to stabilize her network. Rita identifies convergences of anomalies, calculating the potential outcomes, and Prem Palver confronts the fragility of authority firsthand. The galaxy trembles on the edge of chaos. The stakes are unmistakable. Civilization is no longer guaranteed by size, history, or bureaucracy. Survival depends on the convergence of awareness, courage, and timely action. The Seldon plan will unfold, but the path is not without peril. The galaxy is a living organism, responding to perturbations with emergent consequences, and the first Seldon crises are its initial tests. And as the crises converge, Trantor itself seems to vibrate with tension. The hum of machinery, the flicker of artificial sunlight, and the echoes of footsteps through corridors create a sensory and symbolic backdrop. A civilization alive yet trembling, poised between survival and collapse. Every choice matters. Every action ripples outward. The galaxy waits silently, knowing that the first domino has fallen, and that what follows will determine millennia. The air in Trantor's sublevels is thick with recycled oxygen, faintly metallic, carrying the scent of machinery, ink, and heated metal. It hums with a subtle vibration, the pulse of a civilization built on both brilliance and fragility. Workers, clerks, and archivists move through narrow corridors, their footsteps echoing against steel and concrete. Each minor action, a misfiled report, a delayed maintenance check, a whispered warning, becomes amplified in ways most cannot perceive. The city is alive, yet its heartbeat teeters on instability. Above, the upper levels glimmer with artificial sunlight reflecting off polished spires. Senators debate ceremonial minutiae, oblivious to crises unfolding in sectors light years away. The sensory contrast, bright, orderly, and structured above, dim, chaotic, and improvisational below, mirrors the philosophical tension of the empire itself. Appearances of stability conceal the turbulence beneath. Civilization is a living organism, magnificent yet vulnerable, dependent on the perception and action of countless individuals. Bela navigates the crowded marketplaces with heightened awareness. Traders shout over the hum of automated delivery systems. Holographic advertisements flicker in the neon haze. Shipments from dozens of sectors arrive out of sequence. She adjusts routes, reroutes convoys, and manipulates alliances with precision born of necessity. Every choice carries amplified consequences, affecting trade, politics, and even the outcomes of the emerging Seldon crises. To outsiders, she is merely a merchant. In truth, she is a crucial actor in the survival of civilization. The sensory immersion extends beyond sight and sound. The tactile feel of control panels, the subtle vibration of transport conduits, the faint ozone of electric machinery, all remind citizens that the empire is both human and artificial. Civilization is not abstract. It exists in choices, adjustments, and acts of foresight that echo through millions of systems. Power without awareness is fragile. Order without perception is illusory. Rita pores over data in the archives, tracing probabilities across decades of records and contemporary anomalies. The numbers pulse with elegance, yet their perfection is threatened by the unpredictability of human behavior. Each anomaly, an unauthorized shipment, a fleet's deviation, a minor rebellion, introduces chaos into otherwise deterministic patterns. The Seldon plan, brilliant as it is, relies on human action, insight, courage, and the ability to act amid uncertainty. Mathematics alone cannot save civilization. The philosophical tension deepens as crises converge. Trantor is both symbol and mirror. Civilization's splendor above, its vulnerability below. Knowledge and wealth coexist with fragility. Order and chaos are intertwined. The empire teaches a lesson repeated across history. No matter how vast, how sophisticated, or how brilliant, any civilization can falter if human perception and adaptability fail. The elegance of structure cannot substitute for awareness. Modern parallels are striking. In our world, vast networks, financial systems, supply chains, communication grids appear stable, yet subtle disruptions cascade with dramatic effect. A single miscommunication, a delayed shipment, a technological failure can ripple globally. Trantor, magnified across millions of systems, exemplifies this principle. Civilization's survival is not guaranteed by scale or history. It depends on human comprehension and action at critical moments. Even the core senses fragility, though rarely acknowledged. Prem Palver observes anomalies in fleet coordination, trade discrepancies, and unanticipated unrest. He knows the empire is vast, yet the intricate interdependence of human decisions and system vulnerabilities makes control increasingly illusory. Authority, inherited over millennia, is insufficient against emergent crises. Insight must replace assumption. Awareness must override ritual. Civilization's survival now depends on individuals acting in the shadows of perceived order. The sensory experience underscores philosophical stakes. The hum of machinery, the clatter of transport systems, the flicker of holographic displays, and the artificial sunlight above all create a living metaphor. Trantor is both magnificent and delicate, a civilization in which micro decisions carry macro consequences. Every delayed report, every misfiled document, every human improvisation amplifies the impact of the crises. Awareness and adaptability are no longer optional, they are survival itself. Bela's journey illuminates this truth. Each rerouted shipment, each alliance negotiated in shadowed corridors, becomes a node in a web of cause and effect that spans sectors. What appears as opportunism or minor intervention is, in fact, a stabilizing force within the plan.
Similarly, Uran's archival vigilance preserves knowledge that could be lost to chaos. Rita's calculations allow the galaxy to perceive patterns before they spiral out of control. Civilization relies on the interplay between insight, action, and adaptability, a network of human agency interwoven with predictive mathematics. Even mundane experiences reveal philosophical resonance. Workers repairing conduits, clerks filing reports, children playing in shadowed sublevels, each contributes to the emergent patterns shaping the future. Civilization is alive in its details, fragile in its assumptions, and dependent on countless unseen actions. The elegance of order cannot substitute for the human capacity to perceive, act, and adapt. The first Seldon crises escalate, and the sensory and philosophical layers merge. Alarms sound in remote sectors, fleets adjust to unpredictable threats, and trade networks shift unexpectedly. Bala maneuvers through chaos with precision. Uran guards fragile archives, now aware that knowledge alone cannot guarantee survival. Rita recalculates probabilities, witnessing anomalies converging in ways that challenge even Seldon's predictive elegance. Prem Palver confronts the limits of authority, realizing that the core's perception lags dangerously behind reality. The galaxy, vast and interconnected, vibrates with uncertainty. Civilization teeters on a threshold. Brilliance coexists with vulnerability, knowledge with ignorance, order with chaos. Every action, no matter how small, now has amplified consequences. The first Seldon crises are no longer abstract, they are immediate, human, and sensory, unfolding across corridors, markets, and starports. And in the quiet of hidden archives, the forbidden equation pulses silently. It waits for the perceptive, the courageous, and the adaptable to act. The plan will unfold, but success depends on human choices, insight in darkness, courage in peril, and adaptability amid chaos. Civilization survives not by its scale, but by its capacity to respond to what it cannot yet fully perceive. Bela moves through the narrow corridors of a rimward starport, the metallic scent of machinery and ozone thick in the air. Her boots echo against steel floors, mingling with the distant roar of lev ships and the murmurs of anxious merchants. She carries the weight of thousands of shipments, each decision critical, each delay a potential catalyst for chaos. A misrouted crate could starve an entire system. An intercepted convoy could spark rebellion. She navigates not only the physical corridors, but the invisible web of consequences stretching across the galaxy.
Meanwhile, in the sublevels of Trantor, Uran pores over encrypted archives, aware of the magnitude of his discovery. He traces anomalies in fleet movement, trade patterns, and civic data, sensing that multiple crises are converging faster than predicted. The air is heavy with recycled oxygen and the faint odor of ink and machinery. Shadows stretch along the corridors, reflecting both the physical and symbolic darkness closing in. Each moment is a test of judgment. One misstep could unravel months of careful planning, imperiling countless lives. Rita works in silence, her fingers tracing the edges of predictive holograms, charts, and probability matrices. She identifies a chain of anomalies across sectors, subtle deviations that the core cannot perceive. Her mind races as she connects patterns in trade, fleet deployments, and minor rebellions, seeing the skeleton of the first Seldon crisis taking shape. The mathematics are elegant, yet human behavior injects chaos at every turn. Her every insight is a fragile bridge between statistical inevitability and human unpredictability. In a rimward sector, a fleet captain hesitates. He observes townsfolk organizing militias, merchants rerouting shipments, and rumors of rebellion spreading. Orders from the core demand enforcement, yet acting without adaptation risks civilian catastrophe. He pauses, caught between obedience and prudence, between duty and survival. His choice, though small in isolation, will ripple across multiple systems. Here lies the essence of the crises. Human judgment at its most consequential, where one hesitation can alter the course of history. Back on Trantor, Prime Palver convenes a rapid council. Artificial sunlight floods the chamber, but shadows lurk in corners, both literal and metaphorical. He presents evidence of anomalies across multiple sectors, urging decisive action. Yet tradition and protocol resist urgency. Senior officials nod, yet their comprehension is shallow. Civilization's survival now hinges not on their inherited authority, but on the insight, courage, and decisiveness of individuals operating outside ceremonial structures. Bela faces a direct threat. Rogue factions intercept her shipments, believing her rerouting efforts a challenge to local power. Alarms blare through the starport as crates ignite, smoldering in sparks and smoke. She improvises, recalculates routes, and leverages her knowledge of trade and alliances to stabilize critical sectors. Each decision is a gamble. Each action carries amplified consequences. Civilization, fragile and sprawling, bends around the choices of one determined individual. Uran, sensing intrusion, confronts a shadowed figure in the archives. Every movement carries risk. Every sound could betray his position. Recognition sparks. A rival agent, perhaps loyal to unknown forces, perhaps acting under their own interpretation of the plan. Words are scarce. Tension is absolute. The stakes are immediate. Failure here may alter the trajectory of the first Seldon crisis. Knowledge itself is weaponized, fragile, and vital. Rita recalculates probabilities as anomalies converge. A rebellion in one sector, a misrouted fleet in another, and a critical delay in commerce intersect. The elegance of Seldon's mathematics strains under human unpredictability. Each anomaly magnifies the others. The plan's success depends on the perceptive, adaptable, and decisive. Civilization now teeters, suspended in a web of cause and effect, human judgment, and statistical inevitability. The human cost is palpable. Families in outlying sectors endure shortages and fear. Clerks, scholars, and merchants operate in shadows, aware that small actions now carry amplified consequences. Traders like Bela thread through uncertainty, balancing risk and survival. Fleet captains navigate moral dilemmas amid chaos. Across countless worlds, ordinary lives intersect with the grand mechanics of the plan, often without recognition or reward. The first Seldon crisis escalates into tangible danger. A rimward rebellion spreads rapidly, aided unknowingly by delays in rerouted shipments. Fleets misalign, trade networks fracture, and rumors ignite panic. On Trantor, Uran's confrontation intensifies. The shadowed figure moves with purpose, intent opaque but threatening. Bela maneuvers convoys under fire, while Rita recalculates probabilities, eyes wide as her models threaten to collapse under converging anomalies. The culmination approaches. Uran makes a decisive move, reaching for critical archives while the intruder closes in. Bela executes a high-risk maneuver to protect her network, altering supply lines across multiple sectors. Rita watches patterns unfold, knowing that one wrong calculation could cascade into catastrophe. Prem Palver confronts the limits of authority, realizing centuries of bureaucracy are insufficient to contain emergent crises. The galaxy trembles as individual actions amplify systemic fragility. And then the corridor plunges into darkness. Alarms blare. Sparks fly from compromised consoles. Bela's convoy is intercepted. Uran faces the intruder. Rita's predictions verge on collapse. The first Seldon crisis has begun in earnest, and civilization teeters at the edge. Every decision, every choice, every act of courage or hesitation will resonate across countless worlds. In that moment, the galaxy is silent in its anticipation. The outcomes are unknown. The plan is in motion, yet dependent entirely on perception, action, and adaptability. One misstep, one error, one overlooked anomaly could alter the fate of thousands of sectors and millennia of history. The first domino has fallen, and the cascade is inevitable. The last thought that echoes in the minds of Bela, Uran, Rita, and Prem Palver is identical, though unspoken. The survival of civilization, the very future of the galaxy, now rests on them. The core of Trantor trembles, though its spires remain gleaming under artificial sunlight. For centuries, the city has symbolized the first Galactic Empire's permanence, a civilization grown so vast that it once seemed immune to entropy. Yet now the hum of machinery feels jagged, almost alive with tension. Alarms echo faintly across the upper levels, while in sub-levels, the scent of ozone, hot metal, and burning circuits permeates the air. Civilization is straining under its own weight, and the first Seldon crises have become a storm no bureaucracy can contain. Bela races through the rimward corridors, navigating convoys through collapsing trade networks. Ships sputter, lev pads fail, and factions exploit the chaos attacking supply lines. Each decision she makes stabilizes one system while destabilizing another. The trade routes are arteries of civilization, and she is the surgeon, moving with precision and fear. A miscalculation here could ignite rebellion in dozens of sectors. A correct choice could save thousands of lives. Every choice carries cosmic weight. Meanwhile, Uran faces the intruder in the archives, the silent pulse of data terminals illuminating both their faces. Words are unnecessary. Every gesture is loaded with consequence. The intruder moves with skill and intent, aware of the importance of the archives and the forbidden equations stored within. Uran must act decisively, balancing aggression with preservation. One wrong move could compromise the plan, potentially unraveling centuries of foresight and effort. Rita recalculates probability matrices furiously, her hands a blur over holographic interfaces. Anomalies converge faster than she anticipated, fleets misalign, rebellions escalate, and trade collapses in a synchrony that pushes her predictive models to their limits. The elegance of Seldon's mathematics strains under human unpredictability, and yet she glimpses paths of resilience, small interventions that, if executed at precise moments, will preserve civilization's core. Insight is survival. Hesitation is disaster. Across Trantor, Prem Palver convenes emergency councils, but ceremony and hierarchy offer little utility. Senators argue over minutiae while the galaxy collapses around them. Palver realizes the limitations of authority. Knowledge without action is worthless. Power without perception is impotent. He delegates to those with understanding, insight, and courage. The plan unfolds not through command, but through the distributed decisions of perceptive individuals acting in moments of extreme uncertainty. Fires flare in rimward sectors. Cities on remote planets erupt in chaos as shortages and mismanagement collide. Merchants reroute supplies, fleets scramble to maintain order, and citizens panic. The galaxy is alive with motion, but its pattern is turbulent, chaotic, yet ultimately guided by the invisible hand of Seldon's psychohistory. Civilization is both fragile and resilient, the result of countless small choices, human courage, and adaptive intelligence. Byla intercepts a convoy under attack. Shuttles collide, sparks fly, and debris falls like meteors across the landing platform. She improvises, reroutes the convoy, and negotiates temporary alliances with factions she once mistrusted. Every choice saves lives, yet every choice carries the risk of unintended consequences. Civilization hinges on these human acts, the threads of existence woven through courage, calculation, and perception. Uran seizes a critical archive, securing the forbidden equations just as the intruder strikes again. A corridor erupts in sparks and flickering lights. The struggle is intimate yet consequential. The fate of sectors and the continuity of the plan rest on a narrow margin of success. Knowledge itself becomes a weapon, fragile and potent, illuminating both human agency and vulnerability. Rita identifies a path through the converging crises. She communicates via secure channels, guiding fleets, merchants, and officials in a delicate choreography. Each instruction has amplified consequences. Each reroute, each alliance, each calculated risk is a thread in the tapestry of survival. Probability, human action, and timing merge into a tense symphony. Civilization survives through perception, courage, and adaptive intelligence. Preem Palver stands at the council chamber's observation window, witnessing both the grandeur and fragility of Trantor. The upper spires gleam, artificial rivers shimmer, but shadows lengthen in sublevels and outer sectors. He feels the city's pulse, alive yet vulnerable, magnificent yet precarious. The core is a symbol of stability, yet it is not enough. Civilization depends on action, insight, and courage distributed across the galaxy. Hierarchy alone cannot prevent collapse. The Seldon crises peak. In multiple sectors, rebellions intersect with logistical failure. Fleets misalign, trade networks fragment, and remote populations panic. The galaxy vibrates with tension. Byla, Uran, Rita, and Palver act as catalysts, stabilizing critical points with foresight, decisiveness, and courage. Civilization teeters on a razor's edge. One misstep, and centuries of accumulated knowledge, culture, and governance could unravel in days. And yet, amidst the chaos, there is emergence. Patterns coalesce, improvisations converge, and the galaxy begins to respond adaptively. Bela's trade networks stabilize critical sectors. Uran preserves and transmits key knowledge. Rita's predictive adjustments guide fleets with near-perfect timing. Palver's delegation ensures that authority does not hinder response. Civilization survives, not because it is immutable, but because human action intersects with the plan at precise, critical junctures. The core itself begins to vibrate with tension. Machinery hums unevenly, lights flicker across spires, and sublevels hum with energy as clerks, workers, and scholars respond to crises in near-chaotic synchronization. Civilization is alive, reacting, adapting, and surviving through distributed insight and courage. The Empire's collapse is not absolute. It is directed, mitigated, and guided by the interplay of human perception and the predictive mathematics of the plan. The climax converges in a single, tense moment. A rimward fleet approaches a rebellious planet. Trade convoys intersect with misaligned patrols. Civilians evacuate cities under threat. Bila executes a risky maneuver to reroute supplies. Uran secures critical data. Rita adjusts probability matrices. Palver ensures adaptive authority. The galaxy vibrates with imminent catastrophe, yet survival remains possible. Every choice matters. Every act resonates across systems. Civilization's fate hinges on perception, courage, and timely action. And then, at the precise instant, the forbidden equation pulses in hidden archives. It is both a guide and a warning. The plan continues, yet its success is contingent on human agency, judgment, and adaptability. The crises will resolve, but the future remains uncertain. Patterns of stability emerge, yet anomalies persist. The Empire survives the moment, but the shadow of collapse remains ever present, reminding all that brilliance coexists with fragility. As Trantor hums and shines, the galaxy exhales in tension. The foundations rise quietly, Termini and Star's End preparing for the next centuries, guided by the plan but dependent on human action. Civilization persists, knowledge survives, and the Dark Age is shortened. But the lessons are unrelenting. Survival requires insight, courage, and vigilance across generations. And as the dust settles, a question echoes through the corridors, starports, and hidden archives. If even an empire spanning millions of worlds, built over 12,000 years, is vulnerable to collapse, how fragile is any civilization, anywhere? How reliant are we on perception, courage, and the delicate web of human action to prevent disaster? If every empire must fall, can even our own world escape the same fate?